Chapter 491. From the time he killed Right-Hanton, it had only been 10 minutes since the start of the battle between the epic professionals. William had already killed 3 epic experts. How could such a strong combat power not make people tremble in fear? However, the encirclement did not disperse. The epic experts stood in pairs to prevent William from killing again. William was able to defend against the sudden attack of Thunderflash. William's teleportation skill had a weakness, and its lethality was not as strong. But His Highness's thick skin and thick flesh also caused the many experts who surrounded him to suffer greatly. Should they attack him? They could not. If they did not attack him, he would attack them. But what could they do if they attacked him? Every time, William would look pitiful, but he would explode with powerful attacks. He would charge at his enemies with the intention of perishing together with them. However, perishing together was just a saying. The Lord of the City of Dawn would not die, but the enemies who were targeted by him might not. More importantly, William seemed to have the bloodline of a super berserker. The more painful it was, the faster his recovery speed would be. Many people thought that there was a limit to this characteristic. But William had been beaten for half an hour, and he was not dead yet. Who knew what his limit was? The bloody-handed butcher, Gugas, seized the opportunity and used his super-normal punches to hit William's skull. William's hair was blown off, and his head was bleeding profusely. Gugas could feel that his extremely hard hands, which were comparable to top-notch weapons of the same level, had not cracked William's skull. How is this possible? Has his head become the head of the Thunder God? Is his strongest state bald? Otherwise, why is his head so hard? Gugas did not give William a chance to counterattack. He immediately retreated. When the others faced William's attacks, they were very careful. They stood back to back, afraid that they would be caught by William. Many of the epic experts were secretly cursing. The Lord of the City of Dawn was the real bloody-handed butcher. Gugas's small claws were like the moaning fist compared to William. The commander of the Desert Kingdom, John Cruz, saw that the situation on the epic battlefield was getting worse. He could not help but send a telepathic message to Sword Lord Golden Sand. Can you kill him? If you can't, don't fight. If this drags on, we will suffer more casualties. Just as John finished his sentence, a ray of sword light descended from the sky. In the next second, dozens of sword lights, hundreds of sword lights, tens of thousands of golden swords fell like rain, layers upon layers, densely packed together. The sword chi that filled the sky was like a torrential downpour, making it impossible for anyone to dodge, especially when those sword lights gathered together. It was as if a 1,000-meter-long golden sword had descended from the sky. "Sword Venerable Golden Sand's divine sword Skyfall," someone exclaimed. "What a powerful aura! I'm not his target, but I can't move an inch. His target is the Lord of the City of Dawn." The epic professional of the Red Fire Kingdom gasped. No one knew when Sword Venerable Golden Sand had prepared this move. Previously, when everyone was on the battlefield, the Golden Sand Honorable had been attacking William non-stop. It had to be said that among the 20 or so epic professionals in the Desert Kingdom, the bloody-handed Gugas was very powerful. His fists were enough to injure William, but he could not withstand the attacks of the others. But Sword Venerable Golden Sand was too powerful. Not only could his sword energy and sword techniques cause significant damage to William, but the sword energy that remained in William's body would also hinder William's recovery speed. Feng was only able to endure it because he had unleashed the power of the Holy Spirit. All his attributes had increased explosively, in addition to the HP recovery effect of the Thunderbolt Heart. In short, this cunning old fox used Death Announcement and Ghost Book to reduce his HP regeneration by 30%. Damn it, no wonder that old bastard is still alive even though the Desert Kingdom is no more. His Royal Highness cursed under his breath. He had felt that something was wrong. Although Swordsman Golden Sand's sword technique was strong, he had not used his full strength. It turned out that he had stacked a lot of buffs on him when he had attacked. In the end, it led to the appearance of the huge golden sword in the sky. He had nowhere to run. Just like Thor's karma weapon, the Gungnir. However, it could also be due to the buff on his body. But no matter what, he had to resist this seemingly unstoppable sword. Venerable swordsman Golden Sand could only watch helplessly as William was forced into the ground by the sword chi. He pressed his right hand down lightly and shouted angrily, "Die!" Rumble. The 1,000-meter-long golden longsword hit William. It was like a mountain that had forcefully slammed William into the ground. Countless sword chis exploded. The shock waves that wreaked havoc in a radius of tens of thousands of meters broke through several domains. The epic experts from both sides were severely injured. The name of swordsman Golden Sand attracted the attention of many epic experts. He was very powerful, but they could still sense a weak aura from William's body. Someone cast a spell to disperse the smoke and dust. A huge crater appeared on the ground. William was half kneeling in the crater. He used his hands to protect his head. Electric arcs danced on his hands, but there was no trace of injury. However, his right arm, head, and upper body were all covered in bone-deep injuries. But the most shocking thing was not the hand of Thunder God that had been destroyed. Instead, it was the golden blood that flowed out from his heart and his bones that shone with golden light. This was the scene that made countless people dumbfounded. Some shield-bearers even thought that William had killed himself with a piece of tofu. When Gugas saw this scene, he beat his chest with both hands and wanted to cry. He could not help but mutter, "Invincible Vajra body, Vajra. I don't want to live anymore." How did a ranger like him train to have the invincible Vajra body? What was the invincible Vajra body? If it was just the physical strength and defense of 3 points, then it was not a big deal. Instead, it was a hidden attribute that was hidden in the data. His bones were different from ordinary people. They had turned completely golden and were indestructible. His heart and bone marrow had also undergone a qualitative change. The blood in his heart was also shining with golden light. With these two attributes, it was the invincible Vajra body. It was the strongest defense that an epic professional tank could achieve. Of course, this move caused unimaginable damage to William. William lost 70% of his health points. But this also activated the invincible Vajra body. Everyone saw the flesh on the surface of William's body rolling and recovering at an unimaginable speed. D**MN. Swordsman Golden Sand could not help but curse. He turned his head and transformed into a beam of golden light that disappeared into the horizon. He could not fight this battle. In particular, William had yet to use his trump card. This was his trump card that gave him legendary combat power. Everyone knew that this was his trump card, and they also knew that if this trump card was used, William would suffer severe repercussions. Swordsman Golden Sand wanted to force William to use his trump card. But the battle was already at this stage. If William did not use his trump card, then there was no need to fight anymore. It was a truce. The epic experts of the Desert Kingdom dispersed their domains and retreated to the fortress. But they stared intently at William and the experts of the Red Fire Kingdom. William was using his gaze to warn them that if they still wanted to fight, they would have to start an all-out war. The epic experts of the Desert Kingdom would also rush over. At that time, it was uncertain who would emerge victorious. Burning Cinder wielded the lava-like Dragon Slayer saber and flew to William's side. She asked, "Do you still want to fight?" William raised his eyebrows. "We can, but it's not necessary. This war doesn't belong to the City of Dawn. The longer we fight, the more we will earn. Today, we'll give the Desert Kingdom an appetizer. We'll make them abide by the rules and prevent them from causing trouble. Your Highness is wise. I feel that with your Highness's tankiness, you can definitely fight with them for another day," Ranwu said with a chuckle. William's mouth twitched. It was not a problem for him to continue fighting. His health points were as fast as before. But he was afraid that swordsman Golden Sand would have other tricks up his sleeves. If that happened, William would be forced to start a massacre. If he used the unparalleled Holy Thunder and the intermediate elemental body separately, the effects would not be too outstanding. Of course, this was relatively speaking. If he used one of the skills separately, his combat power would increase exponentially. He would be much stronger than now. But only when he used both skills at the same time could he have legendary combat power. This was why he did not use these two skills separately. They were his true trump cards. Once he used his trump card, it would be a life and death battle. William would not hold back. Let's not talk about anything else. If half of the 20 epic experts of the Desert Kingdom could escape, they would be considered lucky. But if he dared to do so, he would definitely incur the wrath of the enemy legendary experts. What's more, some hidden enemies might think of ways to kill him, who was a potential threat, to prevent him from reaching the legendary level. Hence, William endured. The others did not know what he was thinking. Otherwise, he would definitely take the great supplement pill and fight 300 rounds with him. If killing 3 epic-ranked professionals was considered tolerating, then the experts of the Desert Kingdom would have to smile and say to Lao Wang next door, "Please continue and put in more effort." The epic battlefield had temporarily come to an end. When King Vikrul of the Red Fire Kingdom heard the news, he was overjoyed. Although it was not as wasteful as rewarding the 3 armies, the fortress and the army of players had enough to eat and drink. He even doubled the wages of the players for 7 days. Many players were so happy that their noses were bubbling, and they praised the prince for being awesome. What was William doing? He was using the thunder crystals to repair his elemental armor. Fortunately, he had obtained many thunder crystals from the thunder region. Otherwise, he would not be able to repair his elemental armor set if it was damaged. Damn, it's a loss. Why don't I fight them naked in the future without wearing any equipment? William could not help but mutter. William knew that it was not a good idea. The elemental armor gave him hundreds of points in all attribute. In addition, he had various defensive abilities and skills. It was not something that he could not wear even if he did not want to. The most important thing was, if he did not wear armor, he would be beaten until he had no clothes to wear. In the magical fantasy world, there was a possibility that his equipment would not be damaged after being beaten to death. Phew. It was a headshot. In the following days, the friction between the 2 kingdoms became more intense. Both sides sent out legions to seek opportunities to invade the enemy's territory. The 3 dwarf legions also launched several attacks, but the number of players was sufficient. Even if they suffered heavy casualties, they still completed their mission and stalled the dwarf legion. This caused the 3 dwarf kingdoms to be in a difficult position. They had no choice. Against the Death Legion, they could not fight a protracted battle. They could only fight in one wave. Otherwise, the players who kept reviving would be too difficult to deal with. As time passed, it was the first month of version 4.0. It was a beautiful April when many animals were in heat. It was a terrifying April when dark creatures were everywhere. It was the second wave of darkness invasion. It had arrived. Chapter 492. A team of 11 members from the Lonely Mountain was riding on Dragon's Blood warhorses and heading west. They had been traveling for nearly 20 days. They had not encountered any obstacles or assassinations along the way. Other than some reckless magical beasts suddenly rushing in front of them and suddenly trembling in fear, they had not encountered any accidents. This boring life was expected by everyone, and it was also the situation that they did not want to encounter. This meant that the Dwarf Kingdom would definitely have the determination and strength to kill Odom the moment they made a move. "Old Odom, how far are we from your hometown?" Battle Wizard McLean suddenly asked. Odom, who was riding on the dragon's blood horse, squeezed the horse's abdomen with his short legs and said, "Didn't we just enter the territory of the Red Fire Kingdom? If we don't take a detour, We can directly pass through the Desert Kingdom. Then we'll be halfway there. What do you plan to do? The Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom are at war, and William is there. We can take a detour. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry. Odom scratched his head and said embarrassedly. Akarov said nonchalantly, Why would we take a detour? We'll go straight. Even if it's the center of the battlefield, I won't take a detour. That's not good. It might cause trouble. Odom thought of William's plan and could not help but say cautiously. What are you afraid of? I'm a close combat wizard. Why would I take a detour just because there's danger ahead? McLean took out a 40-meter-long broadsword and gestured. Everyone was speechless when they saw him. They did not know if he had chosen the wrong occupation. He was talented in close combat, but he had chosen to be a wizard. But his teacher was a white-robed knight, so the others could only think that he was specially chosen by the warlock saint. Odom got along well with the members of the Lonely Mountain team. As Odom had been the deputy city lord for so many years, his mind had been honed to be as hard as steel. He was cunning and unfathomable. How could he be arrogant or make some stupid mistakes? Moreover, the teammates that William had chosen for him were too awesome. All of them were epic professionals. All of them were famous experts from other forces. Fortunately, Odom Heavyhammer wasn't weak either. After eating the bloodline fruit, he had also regained his legendary bloodline and stepped into the epic rank. The reason why the others respected him, in addition to their good relationship with William, was that Odom was likely to become the Lord of Lonely Mountain and revive the Dwarf Empire. Just this point alone was enough for everyone to respect him. Or it could be said that no one present was the absolute leader. They were all companions that William had gathered at the last minute. Since the target had appeared, they just had to rush forward. Plan? There was no need. Strategy? There was no need. Detour? Impossible. At that moment, Roderick of the Mercenary Guild, William's old friend from version 1.0, had become an authoritative figure in the Southern Region Mercenary Guild. He had just received a transmission. After taking a look, he could not help but smile. The Red Fire Nation and the Desert Sea Nation have just engaged in an epic battle. More than 40 epic experts have participated in the battle. What's going on? Adolf, who had joined the Palace of Darkness, could not help but ask. Spy from the City of Dawn, ding dong. Ding dong. Almost everyone received the transmission. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw the message. Cassidon exclaimed, William is good. He killed 3 epic professionals, and one of them was an honored epic. TSK. There's also an enchanter from the Magic Sanctuary. I feel that William is in trouble. His teacher, Likangrola, is also a werewolf. The 11 of them discussed among themselves. They seemed to be discussing if they should take the opportunity to take a look at the battlefield. But in the next second, Lancelot's expression changed when he received the message. He said in a deep voice, The darkness invasion is coming. It will happen within 3 days. Everyone's heart sank. Their joy had dissipated. The darkness invasion was a heavy burden on everyone's head. Even if the sky collapsed, the tall man would hold it up. The scale of the darkness invasion this time was not too large. Most of them knew that it would not pose a threat to the power of the kingdoms. But what about the next time? What about the next time? Odom glanced at Lancelot, who did not look too good. He seemed to understand that Lancelot was anxious and wanted to send Odom to the Lonely Mountain as soon as possible. Then, he would lead his troops to kill the dark creatures. So he said with good intentions, Why don't we speed up and fly over? Lancelot did not hesitate. He immediately rejected and said, No need. I've promised William, and I will definitely do it. But we can speed up by riding horses. Okay, we'll go all the way. Even if there's an attack from a legendary professional, I'll make him suffer. The close combat wizard, McLean, took out his 40-meter-long broadsword and pointed to the west. When the others saw him, the depressing atmosphere was reduced. After all, as the clown of this team, McLean, the Melee Magus, had always done a good job. The traces of the Lonely Mountain team were not hidden. Many people knew their route. The 80,000 to 90,000 traveling bards in the City of Dawn released information about them every day. Every time they got closer to the Lonely Mountain, the Dwarf Kingdom, which had been targeting Odom, would feel more pressure. On the same night, in the capital of the Iron Fist Dwarf Kingdom. Although it was called the capital, it was actually a giant mountain that had been hollowed out. Millions of dwarves lived in it, accounting for more than 80% of the Iron Fist dwarf. The reason why so many people could live here was not only because of the large area of the mountain, but also because there were a lot of magical metal veins and other gems under the mountain. Because of that, the city of the dwarves was built layer by layer, like a huge underground labyrinth. It was rumored that tens of millions of dwarves lived in the Lonely Mountain. The underground city inside was famous throughout the gods' continent. Back then, the Flame Devil was dug out from the Lonely Mountain. Fortunately, the dwarves repelled it and sealed it completely. Another interesting thing about the dwarves was that they had always been known as feng shui masters on the gods' continent. Only the dwarves were the most professional in finding magical metal hidden more than 100 meters deep. Many human empires and kingdoms who wanted to find mineral veins in their territories would generally ask for help from dwarf feng shui masters who were proficient in this technique. At this moment, the night was dark. The caves in the Iron Fist Kingdom were brightly lit. The dwarves living here did not have any discomfort. Even the sound of knocking in some deep pits was still continuous, because many dwarves were industrious and greedy. As long as they saw metal, they could not help but want to dig. As for the outside of the Iron Fist Kingdom, there seemed to be no change, but there were many more royal guards inside the palace than usual. A short and exquisite dwarf warrior was holding a knife and axe, each of them at the Grand Master rank, and they looked very explosive. The reason for the increase in the number of royal guards was that there were 4 dwarf kings in the palace. Among them were the Iron Fist King, the Hardbeard King, the Stonefoot King, and the Blue Mountain King. Those who did not come here were the Blacklock Dwarves, the Firebeard Dwarves, and the Doolan Dwarves. In the main hall of the palace, the king of the Iron Fist Kingdom sat high on the throne. Below his buttocks was the skin of a legendary Balrog, and in each of his hands was the skull of a young Balrog. In any case, the Balrog was still a mortal enemy in the hearts of the dwarves, and all the dwarves took pride in killing the Balrog. The iron-fisted king looked at his 3 old friends, who were deep in thought, and said in a dignified manner, "Send out a legend to kill Odom." "Are you really going to kill him?" The Tough-Beard King smiled bitterly. The Stonefoot King sneered. Back then, the Tough-Beard dwarves were the happiest in killing him, and now you're crying like a cat crying for a mouse? Bullsh *T, we have no choice. The Tough-Beard King slapped the table, and was about to stand up and fight with the old guy in front of him. The Blue Mountain King frowned and said, "Enough, enough. Every time we meet, you two can quarrel, but now is not the time for you to quarrel and fight one-on-one. Odom is the problem we should solve the most right now. But I don't think it's a good idea to send out a legendary professional. There are many epic professionals in that team, and they are all talented rising stars. Ordinary legendary professionals may not be able to kill Odom. Is there a legendary assassin in the 4 kingdoms?" The Iron Fist King narrowed his eyes and said with a fierce look, "Then look for the Shadow Killer Alliance. The asking price is too high." "Yes, it's too expensive." The Blue Mountain King rolled his eyes helplessly. "We'll pay for the assassins together. Now is not the time to save money. If Odom is killed, even if the Lord of the City of Dawn participates in the war between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom, his ultimate goal will not be the Lonely Mountain. But just sending the assassins of the Shadow Killer Alliance doesn't seem to be enough, right?" The Tough-Beard King frowned. The Stonefoot King laughed when he heard this. He suddenly said, "Actually, I'm in contact with Gert. Ever since they were driven out of the legendary continent, they are so poor that they can barely afford to eat. As long as we give him enough benefits, he will also send people to help stop the Lonely Mountain team. Let the orc experts create trouble first, and then the assassins will find a chance to kill them. Are we going to cooperate with the orcs again? The Tough-Beard King sighed. He looked at the expressions of his 3 old friends and did not say anything else. If we don't cooperate, are we going to watch him open the gate of the Lonely Mountain? Yes. Are we going to give all the treasures in the Lonely Mountain to Odin for nothing? Do you know how many treasures there are in the Lonely Mountain? It might be more than all of our treasures combined. The Blue Mountain King muttered, "It's been hundreds of years. Give us another 6 or 7 years, and we can open the gate. Then, with the 4 of us, we can restore the glory of the Lonely Mountain. However, the throne will not belong to the Hammer tribe." Speaking of the throne, the 4 people in the hall could not help but fall silent. However, the Iron Fist King broke the silence and said in a deep voice, "It's too early to talk about the throne. The most important thing is to get rid of Odin. What about the 3 old guys? They have also killed many dwarves of the Hammer tribe. Their hands are also stained with blood. Now that they don't want to continue being executioners, we will help them get rid of them. However, don't tell them about the assassination of Odin, in case there are more accidents." A cold light flashed in the Iron Fist King's eyes. The 7 dwarven kingdoms were once the 7 dwarven clans. They had all betrayed the Hammer tribe. Some of them regretted it at that time. They had also stirred up trouble many times, so that the bloodline of the Hammer tribe had been preserved until now. But was it too late for them to regret? Maybe after Odin Hammer regained control of the Lonely Mountain, he might forgive those who had helped him. But the most ruthless executioners like them would definitely not escape death. Not holding a grudge? That was millions of people who were related to the tribe by blood. They were all dwarves with the surname Hammer. Coupled with hundreds of years of hunting, only Odin was left. You said he was not holding a grudge? Tell it to a child. Chapter 493. The darkness invasion was imminent. But the nations of the gods' continent were not as unprepared as before. In the 5 years of the previous version, the small dukedoms had been annexed by the grand dukedoms. The strongest professionals in the Grand Dukedoms were epic professionals, so they knew a lot of things. The Grand Dukedoms had prepared all kinds of military resources. They had placed cannons, catapults, and heavy-duty crossbows on the city walls. Now, they were looking for mercenaries to help defend the city. As a result, the mercenary market in the legendary continent became lively. However, only the City of Dawn was at the top. This was because the City of Dawn had close to 1 million regular soldiers and 3.8 million players. They could all be hired, but the price of hiring a regular army was higher. However, the City of Dawn had obtained countless military achievements in the war against the Orc Empire. Such military achievements were enough to make many small nations look up to them. If they could hire 100,000 regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, they would definitely be able to protect their nation. Fortunately, the City of Dawn had a legion of chosen ones. These chosen ones were cheap and had good combat power. More importantly, they had the courage to kill. They were a group of emotionless, undead soldiers. If it was too expensive to hire the regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, it would be better to hire players. Paul Bain's Eastern Region Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion of the Northern Region. But the mercenary warriors were normal people, and they would die. Even if their prices were not as high as the regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, they were not cheap. As a result, the players became the most desirable targets of the Darkness Invasion. Due to the war between the Red Fire Nation and the Desert Nation, William mobilized 800,000 players. Most of these 800,000 players were in version 1.0 and 2.0. Most of them had reached the advanced level or were close to it. As for the remaining 3 million players, most of them were at the intermediate level. There were even some novice beginners. Originally, these players could only do simple mercenary missions such as fighting, running errands, catching magical beasts, and other small missions. But the Darkness Invasion arrived. The 3 million players instantly received the notification of the main storyline quest, and there were as many as 15 of them. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't split themselves into two, they would have exhausted themselves from receiving these main storyline quests. There were 15 S-level main storyline missions because there were 15 Grand Dukedoms in the legendary continent. When the 15 Grand Dukedoms submitted employment applications to the City of Dawn, William provided these missions to the players. Each of the 15 Grand Duchies had 200,000 players. It seems to be a little too scattered. I might not be able to hold on. The prince, who had been studying how to make money, now felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have rejected a few Grand Duchies so that the players would not be so scattered. That way, the Dawn mercenary team could maintain a 100% completion rate. There were actually 2 types of employment missions. One was to directly pay a large sum of money, and the hired person would be responsible for completing the task without any additional payment. The other was to fight every day and work together with the employer to complete the mission. The City of Dawn was very powerful, but he did not want to attract too much hatred. Hence, he chose the second method. He would give them money to fight and work together to complete the missions. Well, after all, he had calculated that the second method of employment would allow him to earn more gold coins every day because he knew that the second wave of dark creatures would last for a long time. However, this was also what he was worried about. The members were too scattered. However, right after that, he received another message. In order to compete with the City of Dawn, the Eastern Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion had lowered their hiring prices. Hence, the Grand Duchies not only had the players of the City of Dawn, but also many powerful NPC mercenaries. It seems that we won't lose so easily. But to prevent the players from being bullied, I have to send some experts to help. After all, the mercenaries are not that harmonious. If not for the experts, the Eastern Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion will definitely bully the cute little sheep. This shows the benefits of having a strong camp. We don't have to be afraid of being bullied by the NPCs. When William thought of this, he heaved a sigh of relief. He had already made preparations. If the Grand Duchies could not hold on, the City of Dawn would exert pressure on them. The City of Dawn exerted pressure on them, forcing them to spend money to hire their own regular army. Otherwise, they would have to wait for the destruction of their country. William believed that when that time came, even the stingiest king and nobles would not give up on their duchies and families. When the time came, the City of Dawn would make a fortune, and their country would survive. It was a win-win situation. No one would lose out. He could also make use of this opportunity to sell equipment, skills, tools, potions, secret manuals, and so on. He could reap a good harvest. Although 2 large mercenary teams and some small mercenary teams had snatched a portion of his profits, at least they could share the burden. But William could also sense that the City of Dawn had sent mercenary missions to the entire legendary continent. He did not interfere much in the northern and western regions. He had only set up strongholds in the Grand Duchies. But he had made use of the immortality of the Chosen Ones and their low prices to seize a large portion of the mercenary market. He had not interfered with the mercenary missions of many kingdoms, but he had already incurred the hostility of many mercenary legions. Now that they had lowered their prices to compete with him, it seemed like they could still compete fairly. But they had to compensate for the deaths of their members. If they continued to do this, they would definitely incur losses. In the future, they might even join forces against him. It's not time to worry about them. Although I've seized a large portion of the mercenary market, there are only so many people in the City of Dawn. It's not like I've taken every piece of meat. William took out a small notebook and wrote down this problem. Then, he ignored it. What were the millions of regular soldiers of the City of Dawn going to do? Of course, they were going to attack. William wanted to take advantage of the fact that the second wave of the Darkness invasion was not strong enough to find the underground devil's dens that were scattered all over the legendary continent. He wanted to give some legions an invincible legion buff. In particular, the second wave of the Darkness invasion would not only target the human Grand Duchies. There would also be many neutral camps, such as the Serafkan, half-elves, dwarves, and Tauren. These small tribes with only tens of thousands of members could be found in the forests, grasslands, and mountain ranges of the legendary continent. They were also under great pressure when facing the Darkness invasion. William was not interested in earning their money. He only wanted to uphold his identity as a messenger of justice. He wanted to send the regular legions to help them resolve the danger. He wanted to use the excuse that it was too dangerous outside to bring them back to the City of Dawn for protection. D*MN, I've made a killing. William laughed mischievously. This was his biggest plan. He did not dare to attack the human Grand Duchies, so he used the hiring method to achieve a win-win situation. Anyway, he felt that it should be a win-win situation. As for the other small factions, they did not have any backers. He would use this excuse to kidnap them and take the opportunity to increase the population of the City of Dawn. If everything went according to plan, after the second wave of the Darkness invasion was resolved, the City of Dawn could increase its population by a few million. They were not humans. They were made up of various races. To the other factions, the cities would not be able to accommodate so many races. This would cause conflicts and even fights. However, William's endowments were amazing. No matter how unhappy these races were at the beginning, they could only say that it was delicious under William's persuasion. But William closed his small notebook. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that there were no major enemies in version 4.0. He wanted to speed up his development and strive to become a high-level neutral camp on the legendary continent. Even if he could not become a first-tier camp like the Temple of Light, he wanted to become a second-tier neutral camp like the City of Chaos. Time flew by and soon 3 days had passed. The border conflicts between the Red Fire Nation and the Desert Nation did not stop just because the Darkness invasion was imminent. Instead, they became more and more intense. Although there were no large-scale battles between the two sides, at least hundreds or thousands of people died at the border every day. The three dwarf legions often attacked the border defense line and fought with the players. However, the equipment of the dwarf legion was too good. The money-minded players were not afraid of death. If the dwarf legion dared to come, they would dare to rob them of their equipment. However, the dwarven army was very powerful. The majority of the dwarven army's members were high-tiered and intermediate-tiered professionals. Including the attribute amplification from their bloodlines, each dwarven army could solo 4 or 5 players. Moreover, with the dwarven army's formation, the dwarven army's players had no hope of survival. If the dwarf legion did not want to suffer too many losses, the players would not have been able to hold on. Therefore, the players felt that they were not getting any benefit. They felt that they were using experience points to exchange for equipment. It was a little disadvantageous. As the players fought, their experience points would be depleted, and they would even drop levels and equipment. The sky is a little gloomy. I heard that the Darkness invasion will occur in the next 2 days. There shouldn't be any devil's dens appearing on this battlefield, right? Changli Jioga looked at the sky and sighed. Xiao Ayan walked to him with her slender legs. She picked up a fruit that was worth 3 gold coins and took a bite. She said vaguely, I don't think so. Didn't His Highness say that the Darkness invasion is mainly aimed at the Grand Duchies? They will attack those forces that have fewer epic experts. Yes. Now that the two kingdoms have so many epic experts at the border, they shouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Chu Liuqiu nodded with certainty. However, as soon as he finished speaking, More than 10,000 meters west of the players' encampment, there was a continuous rumbling sound near the dwarfs' encampment. Many devils' dens were rising from the ground. Countless dark creatures were like marching ants in the desert, madly attacking the dwarfs' encampment not far away. There were many demons flying in the sky. Xiao Ayan opened her mouth, and couldn't help but look at the dumbfounded Chuliuqiu. Did he have a jinx? Did he have to be so accurate? At the same time, Chuliuqiu also received a lot of transmitted messages. Not only was the Blue Mountain Dwarf Army in front of them being attacked by the dark creatures, but the Iron Fist Dwarf Army and the Hard-Beard Dwarf Army were also being attacked. What should we do? Should we take advantage of the situation and attack the Lovers' Army from both sides? Someone's eyes lit up and couldn't help but shout. Yes, let these dwarves enjoy the feeling of having their buttholes explode all over the mountain. That's not good. Although the dwarves are the enemy, the dark creatures are the real enemies. Many female players couldn't bear to watch. Although they were enemies, no matter how they looked at it, the dark creatures were more terrifying. They were less humanoid. They could fight with the dwarves because both sides had accepted some kind of employment mission. Moreover, there were simply too many dark creatures. Even if there were 80,000 to 90,000 dwarves in front of them, there were more than 100 devil caverns. More than 600,000 to 700,000 dark creatures had emerged from them. If nothing unexpected happened, these dwarves, who had once dropped equipment for them, would be annihilated today. Then we won't go. At most, we'll just let them kill each other while we take advantage of the situation. Oh right, Meng Meng, I've saved up a lot of money recently and want to buy a warhorse. I'll take you for a stroll when the time comes. Someone laughed and willingly played the role of a bootlicker. Unfortunately, the girl named Meng Meng refused. Thanks, big bro, but I have a big bro who bought a griffin and wants to take me to the sky to fly and eat cotton candy on top of the clouds. The male player fell into silence. It had to be said that after the Citadel started selling dark creatures, there were many melodramatic situations among the players. The female players would rather cry while sitting on a griffin than laugh while riding on a horse. There are no dark creatures near the Crimson Fire and Desert Fortresses, but they're already fighting, someone reported after receiving the news. Changli Jioga took a deep breath. These 3 dwarven legions are finished. The Crimson Fire Kingdom won't give the Desert Kingdom a chance to support them. Look, who are those people? Someone exclaimed and pointed into the distance. Such dazzling blonde hair, so wild, so familiar, and such a short horse. Isn't that the Vice City Lord? Someone opened his eyes wide. And that little girl Lancelot, that's the Lonely Mountain Squad. They're charging towards the Dwarven Legion. Ding dong. At this time, all the players at the border received a mission. Justice regardless of race. The darkness invasion has arrived on a large scale. Our enemies just now were surrounded by dark creatures. Draw your swords and save the dwarves who are fighting alone. We don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war. Mission difficulty: A+, mission objective: save at least 150,000 dwarves from the 3 dwarven legions. Mission reward? Experience reward? At the same time, one of the half-elf commanders of the regular army of the City of Dawn, who had been hiding among the players, drew his sword and shouted at the countless players and professionals. Prince William said that we don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war. Save the dwarves, then we'll fight to the death. The half-elf commander rode on his warhorse and slowly turned around. He raised his sword and shouted, "Charge with me! Charge!" The players were overjoyed and their faces were filled with pride. They thought to themselves, as expected of His Highness, he has such a strong sense of justice. Prince William is domineering. Prince William is awesome. Prince William is handsome. Our William is the true messenger of justice, the apostle of light. That's right. We don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war with the dwarves. Let's save this group of dwarves and decide the outcome. Chapter 494. The dwarf kingdom didn't expect that hundreds of devil's dens would appear near the army. When they received the message, in addition to the messenger's cry for help, there were also countless terrifying roars, as if demons were whispering in their ears. It was the sound of hell. It was the sound of the dark world. It was obvious that the dark creatures had already rushed into the army camp. The three dwarf kingdoms wanted to seek help from the desert kingdom, but the red fire kingdom had declared a full-scale war. The epic professionals in the fortress didn't dare to act rashly. In order to ensure that the fortress wouldn't be robbed, they didn't dare to send reinforcements. Therefore, the dwarf kingdom could only send their epic-ranked experts to help. However, they also knew that by the time they flew over, the three armies of 300,000 dwarves would have suffered heavy losses. And they were afraid that epic demons would appear and rush into the army. If that was the case, none of the three dwarven armies would be left alive. The cannons were roaring. There were only 30 cannons, but they played a big role on a battlefield of this scale. Each cannonball was enough to blow up dozens of enemies within a dozen meters into pieces. The only drawback was that there were too few cannons. Heavy arrows, accompanied by sonic booms, pierced through the dark creatures one after another. In this kind of dense attack, the heavy crossbow arrows were very effective. The few cannon masters were using long guns and short cannons to launch ranged attack. Beams of light spewed out, and countless dark creatures were harvested in large numbers. The short cannons were blasting out, and the area within a radius of dozens of meters was covered in flames. Everything in front of them was turned into ashes. The mages were also casting all kinds of area of effect magic and amplification magic, but even so, the dwarf army still couldn't stop the dark creatures that suddenly appeared. Not only were there too many of them, moreover, they were coming from all directions, directly surrounding the military camp like a dumpling. There were too many positions that needed to be defended. The dwarf shield warriors guarded the front, constantly bursting out spear and sword energies, resisting wave after wave of attacks at the cost of their own lives. More and more people were dying every second, and more shield warriors were needed to hold them off. There weren't enough shield warriors. The warriors had to come over to fill the gap. In the short span of 3 minutes, Chernfan's eyes lit up. Several thousand of the more than 90,000 Blue Mountain dwarves had already perished in battle. The battle had entered a white-hot stage from the very beginning. Dwarven warriors of the Blue Mountain, maintain the formation, maintain the formation. A Grandmaster Dwarven commander roared. As he handed his flag to the deputy army commander, he leaped into the air and charged into the army of dark creatures like a cannonball. Streaks of 100-meter-long saber chi wreaked havoc among the dark creatures. However, before he could kill too many of them, a Grandmaster-level demon charged at him, and the two of them engaged in an intense melee. This group of stubborn and hard-to-deal-with dwarves were famous throughout the world and were able to establish kingdoms and even empires. This proved that they possessed great strength and ability. Therefore, the dwarves weren't afraid of war. Even in the face of ferocious and terrifying dark creatures, they still wouldn't retreat half a step. However, there were just too many dark creatures, and they appeared too quickly. The dwarven camp, which was in a truce with the player army, was almost defenseless. Therefore, from the very beginning, many of the army formations in the camp had already been broken by countless dark creatures. As a result, the dwarves had to find an opportunity to break out of the encirclement and take revenge in the future. This was because the first wave of enemies wasn't skeleton soldiers or undead creatures. Instead, it was an army of Death Knight. This group of guys who had been resurrected from the dead on the battlefield had powerful combat power. They weren't afraid of death and didn't know pain. They only knew how to swing their blades at their enemies. Moreover, there were a total of 6 such Death Knight. The impact of their attacks was not something that ordinary shield warriors could withstand. In particular, the incubus warhorses they were riding were comparable to Dragonblood warhorses. Why is the strength of this wave of darkness invasion so exaggerated? Why are they here? Look at that fiery red flag. This dark army seems to be under the command of a legendary fire demon lord. Damn it! Someone cursed. According to their speculation, there might be a fire demon who had a grudge against the dwarves and had taken advantage of the second wave of darkness invasion to bring these dark creatures here. Captain, where's our cavalry? We can't defend for much longer. A young dwarf shield warrior whose right arm had been chopped off could not help but ask with bloodshot eyes. There was black blood flowing out of the wound. He had already been infected by the dark aura. The seemingly middle-aged dwarf captain slashed a few dark creatures with his longsword. He then casually released a sword aura and knocked a death knight to the ground. Only then did he turn his head and wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. That's our last resort. It's not the time to attack yet. Is that so? The dwarf warrior with the severed arm looked back. Their cavalry was already gathering rapidly. However, they weren't charging east, but west in the direction of their home. However, he looked at the endless dark creatures in front of him and the few armies that were bitterly resisting the attacks on both sides. He could not help but ask with his eyes wide open, "Are we going to cover their retreat?" The middle-aged dwarf captain was silent for a moment. He once again repelled a strong enemy and stabilized the defensive line. When he spoke again, some of the dwarf warriors next to him pricked up their ears. They only heard him say in a low voice, "Yes, the 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 13th legions are responsible for covering the rear in the east. There are also some legions responsible for covering the rear in the north and south." Hearing this, some of the dwarf warriors' morale was obviously a little low. However, they still did not retreat. The dwarf captain laughed bitterly in his heart, but he still said heartily, "But leave this kind of thing to us veterans. You new recruits are just a hindrance. When the cavalry troops launch an attack, you guys will also leave." The young warriors in the legion did not say anything. They just clenched their swords in their hands. How could they abandon their comrades and retreat alone? Moreover, since they were carrying the military order to cover the rear, they could not retreat. Perhaps if one of them ran, more of their clansmen would be killed by the dark creatures. However, just when they thought that the cavalry was about to break out of the encirclement, there was a loud rumble. A devil's den suddenly exploded, and flames surged into the clouds. It was an epic flame demon, more than 20 meters tall, holding a giant magma sword and rushing toward them step by step. Every step of the flame demon crushed countless dark creatures. But the dark creatures did not care, and the flame demon did not care either. But every step of this tall flame demon was like a war drum beating the hearts of the dwarf warriors. That kind of terrifying momentum was simply suffocating. And the key was, the position where the flame demon appeared was due west. Despair. It was surging in their hearts. If it was only a Grandmaster demon, it would be fine. They had also encountered an epic flame demon. Their fate was almost sealed. Aguchiwa! The flame demon roared and suddenly slashed down with its giant sword. There was a harsh sound of friction in the air. A flaming sword energy hundreds of meters long descended from the sky, as if to tear the sky and the earth apart. The dwarf legion commanders were roaring loudly. Everyone activated their battle energy shield at this moment to form a legion buff to resist this sword. But they also knew, they were just a high-level legion, not a Grandmaster legion. This sword fell. At least thousands, tens of thousands of people would fall under this sword. However, at this moment, the hero unit appeared. A thunder hammer, accompanied by dazzling lightning, broke the flaming sword energy that was about to land on the ground. Then, the hammer flew back again. At the same time, a figure shining with lightning appeared in the center of the military camp. It was him. It was a handsome man with blonde hair. At least in the eyes of many dwarves, they thought that this blonde dwarf with wavy hair was their handsome man. Especially his temperament, he looked like a powerful dwarf from a large dwarf family. As for the enraged flame demon, another opponent appeared in front of him. "May I know who you are?" Many army commanders were surprised. They didn't know that there was such a handsome, golden-haired thunder epic profession in the 7 dwarven kingdoms. Deputy City Lord of Dawn, Odom Heavyhammer, the latter replied calmly. Then, ignoring the shock, confusion, and panic on everyone's faces, he bluntly said, "Don't even think about running. There are more than 600,000 dark creatures surrounding you, and they've already surrounded you in layers. However, the chosen ones of the City of Dawn are not people who will leave you in the lurch. They have already charged over. As long as we work together, these dark creatures won't be able to resist for long." "You!" Someone was about to speak. Odom once again flew high into the sky. He raised the thunder hammer high into the air. He attracted countless lightning bolts and directed them to the ground. In an instant, all the dark creatures within a radius of 600 to 700 meters were wiped out. A huge crater appeared on the ground, as if it had been smashed by the hammer. But in the next second, an epic demon hidden in the dark suddenly slashed at him, causing him to fall into the dark tide. Countless dwarves could not help but exclaim when they saw this scene. Their eyes flashed with genuine worry. They had long heard of Odom Heavyhammer's name. It was rumored that he was the last bloodline of the Lonely Mountain. They also knew that he had formed a Lonely Mountain team. However, they did not expect to encounter the members of the Lonely Mountain team at their most desperate moment. They had even been saved by them. Of course, there were very few epic experts on this battlefield. The other members of the Lonely Mountain team were rescuing the dwarf legions on other battlefield. "What should we do? Guard this place and wait for reinforcements?" a dwarf asked. The deputy commander of the Blue Mountain Dwarf Legion, the Great Mage, said in a deep voice, "Wait." Then he glanced at the puzzled crowd. Then he closed his eyes and a huge water mirror magic reflection appeared in the sky. The dwarves looked up. The dense mass of the Dawn army was less than a kilometer away from the dark creatures. It was not the players who did not have sufficient combat power. It was the Dawn male model team, the Half-Elf Legion, and the veterans who had been to the battlefield in the far north. They could not see the end of the battlefield. Then, hundreds of buglers stood up. A loud and muffled horn sound reverberated in the sky. It was the horn sound of the City of Dawn. It was the horn sound of the counterattack. It was the end of the Second Era. The horn sound of all races in the God's continent launching a counterattack against the dark world. This sound. It was like a memory hidden in the bloodline. The moment the bugle horn sounded, the wind blew. Both the dwarves and the dark army could not help but stop attacking and look at the Dawn army. Because at this moment, everyone thought of the majestic counterattack at the end of the Second Era. Chapter 495. Then, the horn for the counterattack was blown. The City of Dawn and the dwarfs cooperated to launch a counterattack. The dark creatures were not very intelligent. Low-level creatures did not have high intelligence. This meant that they did not have to worry about morale. Even if they were attacked from both sides, they were fearless. It was simple. If they were reckless, it would be over. However, the players did not have to worry about morale either. They charged forward and killed the dark creatures. They were just going to die. Come on, come on. Who's afraid of who? The dark creatures were not afraid of death, but it was as if the fourth calamity was afraid of death. The shield-bearers charged forward. When they approached the army of dark creatures, they raised their shields and charged forward. In an instant, the dark creatures in front of them were smashed into pieces. From a high vantage point, it looked as if two huge white and black tides had collided. The scene was magnificent, and it made one's blood boil. The warriors flew over the shield-bearers' heads and released sword energy and sword energy. They charged into the army of dark creatures valiantly. The rangers and magician players did not even need to aim. They just shot at the dark creatures. As for whether they would injure the frontline players, did it have anything to do with them? They were not the ones who died after all, it was the damage output. The damage output was the key. In every war mission, there would be a leaderboard for the damage output. The mission rewards would be based on the damage output. This was the main reason why the players risked their lives to die. As for the assassin players? Of course, they would just watch. From time to time, they would sneak up with their short swords and daggers to kill the dark creatures. Then, they would retreat. It could not be helped. It was too easy. They could deal enough damage, and they could even use their skills. But if they were not careful, they would die without a complete corpse. Other than the assassins who wore cowhide equipment, normal assassins could only slack around and pick up equipment. This was how life was like for them. In short, assassins could pick up equipment and materials very quickly. They did not lose out in war missions. However, there were many changes in version 4.0. The most important change was that the players had reached the advanced level. Forever Alone from the Golden Age Club was also on the battlefield. He had many professional players who wore legendary equipment. Their combat power was not weak either. These players were very brave in the Dark Torrent. They were the vanguard of the players. They followed the regular army and attacked. Or in other words, among the players, professional players, rich players, and guild players all had dark gold, epic, and legendary set equipment. This group of people had closed the bloodline gap between themselves and the NPCs in all aspects, which was enough for them to explode with powerful strength. At this time, Forever Alone was no longer a ranger. When version 4.0 was released, he had switched to a launcher, and his damage was even more explosive. His long spear and short cannon shot out a burst of azure light. Within a radius of dozens of meters, he was practically invincible. However, not all dark creatures were trash. An extremely fast Death Knight rode on a nightmare warhorse and charged at him. Forever Alone didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward. The spear in his hand disappeared into thin air, and 2 hand cannons appeared in his hands. He aimed them at the Death Knight. Rumble. A violent blue shockwave burst out. The Undead Knight, who was also an advanced Undead Knight, was sent flying along with its mount. The Undead Knight's body also received a continuous burn damage. Fortunately, the Undead Knight had a lot of HP. The instant it rolled off its nightmare warhorse, it transformed into a shadow and appeared before Forever Alone. Sword draw. Whoosh. A pitch-black sword light slashed upwards. Forever Alone was heavily injured, but he did not fall to the ground. His HP bar did not decrease, and he did not stop fighting. With a quick knee strike, he sent the Death Knight flying into the air. Once again, he raised his spear and shot out a ray of azure light like a sniper rifle. Bang! A huge hole appeared in the Undead Knight's chest. However, before the Undead Knight could land, once again, Forever Alone took out 2 hand cannons and fired consecutive shots at the Undead Knight in midair. This advanced Undead Knight could not even fly. In the end, the instant the Undead Knight landed, he raised his spear and fired an energy burst, directly killing the Undead Knight. F***CK, a high-tier leader boss solo, and he was killed instantly? Many players were dumbfounded. They did not expect the launcher class to be so overpowered. The vice-captain of Xing Shi team was riding a wild boar and charging around. As the main tank of Xing Shi team, he was jealous when he saw this scene. He could not help but mutter, "That's too naughty." Our leader was originally a top ranger, but now that he has changed his class to a launcher, his shots seem to be even fiercer and longer. How are we supposed to survive this? Forever Alone did not want to speak. He had never played this class before, so he definitely did not know how difficult it was to play and how expensive it was to pay. Firstly, launchers had very few defensive method. After using some physical skills to increase the distance between them, they had to follow up with other skills. Otherwise, they would become a target. Secondly, there was no justice in spending money. His damage output was all done with gold coins. It was like a hand cannon shot for 3 gold coins. Energy burst shot for 10 gold coins. An energy burst that filled the sky was worth 100 gold coins. This was because every time he attacked, he had to watch as the energy bar of his mana equipment decreased. If he wanted to maintain this level of combat power, he had to immediately replace the mana crystals after they depleted. Although this kind of mana equipment could use battle energy and equipment energy, the energy of the equipment was the main point. The equipment energy could reduce the cooldown time of the launcher's skills. This was the key reason why the launcher's firepower was so strong. He only wanted to say that if the club wanted him to continue playing this class, they had to provide him with a large amount of funds. William had said this before. To the players, when they reached an advanced level, the launcher was their real boss. Although many professional players had become advanced professionals at the end of the previous version, it was nearing the finals and it was not suitable for them to change to a new class. When version 4.0 was released, basically all the major clubs had people who had changed to this new class. Anyway, to the players, they were going to beat the new boss of most of the classes. Especially to the rich players, they had finally encountered a cool place where they could spend money. For example, Lucky Dream, Mars Strength, Earth is not as big as the Moon, and other super rich players had all changed to launchers in version 4.0. According to them, this lousy game was a place where they had nowhere to spend money. They could not even buy pets. In the previous version, they only needed to get a legendary equipment set. They could not spend money anymore. At most, they could repair their equipment. They could not buy pets even if they wanted to. But now, there was finally a place where they could continue to spend money. The appearance of the beast-taming citadel gave them a place to buy magical beasts. To these super-rich players, if their pets died, they would continue to buy. If their pets died again, they would buy again. But the launcher was even more awesome. If you had a hand cannon, I had two, and they were both legendary equipment. If you had two, fine. I had three. When I fought, I would not use magical crystals. I would use hand cannons. It would be faster. This showed that they were different from ordinary players. So, the Darkness Invasion was not just a counterattack by the players and Dwarf. It was also a super moment for the launcher to shine. Similarly, many players who owned magical beasts also showed great lethality in this battle. Only some people were too rash, directly killing their own magical beasts. They didn't even have time to cry. In fact, on this battlefield, they couldn't even bring their former magical beasts back to compensate for their losses. But no matter what, the launcher was very powerful in clearing monsters. The other advanced professions did not have such firepower, not even magicians. For a while, even though the war was still going on, many players on the forum were discussing how awesome the launcher was. One of the videos of Forever Alone's battles were also posted up. Many players wanted to weaken the launcher class. These players were basically mage players. They felt that the launcher class had robbed them of the exposure they should have had in this version. Logically speaking, advanced mage players should have many good area of effect skills. In the future, they would be popular in dungeons and group battles. But the launcher class was obviously competing with them. Many bitter players complained on the forum that this was a game for the rich. Ordinary people could not afford to play it. But some players posted many videos of launcher players dying tragically in the mouths of dark creatures. This video indirectly showed that if the launcher wanted to be powerful, he had to have insane equipment. He had to rely on his powerful output to prevent enemies from getting close. As long as the enemies got close, if his reaction speed was slow and his maneuvering was not sharp enough, he would die on the spot. Because the launcher was too fragile, their magical equipment did not increase their defense. Their lack of close combat skills was also a weakness. In a guild war, as long as the assassin had top-notch maneuvering and techniques, he could easily kill a launcher. The players chatted as they fought. The dwarves were extremely touched. Through the water mirror in the sky, they saw the professionals of the Dawn Army rushing into the Dark Army to save them. They were so touched that tears welled up in their eyes. Especially when they saw many chosen ones coming back to life again and again, just to slash at their enemies. Many dwarves felt that their conscience had been eaten by dogs. Why? Why are we enemies? If the Dawn army was surrounded by the dark creatures, would we help them? Would we disregard our own lives and help them? Damn it, don't say any more. I saw a lot of cute girls wearing colorful skirts charging into the dark army. It made my heart ache to see them. They look like children of my daughter's age. Even if they can be revived, their courage is that of the warriors of the dwarves. Many dwarves were suspicious. Why did they participate in this war that had nothing to do with them? What did the war of the human kingdom have to do with them? Ever since they confronted the Dawn army, the other party had not initiated an attack, but the dwarves had launched many raids according to orders. Now, the other party had disregarded their past enmity and came to rescue them. In that case, who were they fighting for, and what was their goal in fighting this war? Was it the Lonely Mountain? Just as someone was thinking about Odom Heavyhammer, a space tunnel suddenly appeared in the sky. Several epic orcs suddenly rushed towards Odom, who was fighting fiercely with the devils. At the same time, an assassin in the shadows hid among the corpses of the Dark Army and prepared for a fatal attack. He was an assassin from the Shadow Alliance. As long as he paid enough money, he could also kill legendary warriors. Chapter 496. The assassins targeting Odom appeared at the same time as the Darkness invasion. It had to be said that they had seized a good opportunity. This was because Odom was suddenly ambushed by many Beastman assassins while he was fighting the demons. He was caught off guard and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was stabbed into the ground with a sword, and who knew how many of his bones were broken? If not for the bottle of water of life in his mouth, allowing him to recover to full HP, the hidden shadow assassin might have finished him off with one strike. However, Odom had not resolved the crisis yet. The Lonely Mountain team was at their most scattered. There were only Adolf and Legolas on the battlefield, and they were still entangled by the epic demons. Odom was facing an epic demon and 6 epic orcs. No matter how much water of life he had, he would not be able to hold on for long. After all, not everyone was a prince. As a lightning-type professional, he was now fighting against Thor 55. However, Odom could not hold on for more than 30 seconds before he was seriously injured. At this moment, the eyes of the assassins hidden in the pile of corpses lit up. The most awkward situation on the battlefield had occurred. The reinforcements of the 3 dwarf kingdoms suddenly arrived. There were 4 epic experts rushing over from afar. The group of dwarf experts who did not know what was going on saw Odom helping his people fight against the demons and the orcs. They immediately shouted, "Dwarf brother, hold on. We are coming to save you." Then, 3 epic dwarves rushed forward and temporarily took some of the pressure off Odom. But in this situation, the group of Beastman killers couldn't figure it out. What the F***CK? A pale orc carrying a mace looked confused. Your king hired us to be assassins at a high price, and you are here to save this guy. Buddy, are you sure you are not playing us? Damn it, what do we do now? The 6 epic orc assassins were at a loss. The leader of the orcs clenched his fists and said in a muffled voice, "Continue killing. As long as we kill Odom, those dwarves will still pay us. Even if those dwarves dare to play us, His Majesty will make it clear to them. At the very least, he will give us half of the bounty. Otherwise, I don't believe that a mere dwarf kingdom can keep an eye on a saint's aura. But I think this group of people is just pretending to be benevolent. They're probably putting on a show for Odom's companions. At the critical moment, they'll give us a chance to take action." Many Beastman experts rushed over and directly unleashed their domains in the center of the battlefield. All kinds of domains covered thousands of meters, and countless darkness creatures fell in droves. Many dwarves still had lingering fears. Fortunately, their battlefield was not inside the barracks, otherwise it would have been their clansmen who had been seriously injured. Because of this, they did not dare to move the battlefield to another location. They could only guard Odom and fight the orcs to the death. After all, they saw the Dawn army charging towards them. At this time, the Dwarven army was facing a lot less pressure. Their group of experts could fight in the Dark Race army, so there was naturally no need to shift positions. In just 10 minutes, the more both sides fought, the angrier they became. They were also puzzled. Why were the orcs here? The dwarves were thinking, what's going on? Why do you orcs like to bully us dwarves? While the dark creatures were ambushing, you came to kill a wave of them. Aren't you giving us some face? The 6 epic beastman assassins were muttering to themselves, can't you stop blocking? It's fine if you show off to Odom's companions, but you have already injured me. If you keep attacking, I won't be merciful. The scale of the battle was getting bigger. More and more epic experts appeared. Many of the players felt a little dizzy. But where was William? What a coincidence. He and the shadow assassins were hiding in the same pile of corpses. And they were right in front of him. William used his small claws to touch his chin. He looked at the calm shadow assassins, who were ready to attack at any moment. He was considering whether he should attack and kill them first. There was nothing wrong with that. He had used the beast god's transformation artifact. At this moment, he had transformed into a cute little mole. He was crawling around the corpses, as if he was looking for food. But don't be mistaken. Even if William was a 10-centimeter-long mole, he was still an epic meat shield. His combat power was off the charts, and his health points were flowing out in tons. But he had used the aura concealment scroll from the ink guide, so no one could detect his abnormality. The shadow assassins had already noticed him and deliberately glanced at him. But it seemed that his brain was filled with sh*t. No, it should be more accurate to say that his brain was filled with ideas on how to assassinate Odom. So he did not think about how an ordinary mole could roam around the battlefield without being crushed to death by the auras of the experts. William saw that the 3 dwarf experts and the orcs were fighting for real. One of the orc's abdomen was cut open by an axe, and his intestines were exposed to the air. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood, along with many pieces of his internal organs. William couldn't help but laugh out loud. The shadow assassins, who were hiding in the dark, glanced at him again. They were wondering if they should blow the little mole to death. Swoosh! A heavy crossbow arrow came out of nowhere and hit him in the butt. The shadow assassins inhaled a breath of cold air. His face darkened, but he did not dare to move. Instead, he continued to pretend to be dead. But his attention was no longer on the laughing mole. He slowly moved to prevent his butt from being hit by another stray arrow. But an infuriating situation occurred. The little mole seemed to have discovered that he was moving. It curiously came over. Meanwhile, Odom and the others had also arrived. The shadow assassins did not dare to act rashly. They could only continue to hide and wait for an opportunity to kill. So he watched as the little mole slowly crawled over his head, to his back, and even to the spot where the arrow had hit his butt. The shadow assassins felt that something was wrong. But he was too close to the other epic expert. He was afraid that once he revealed his aura, he would be exposed. So he decided to use his endurance skills. There was a saying, a real assassin had to endure what ordinary people could not. What was there to be afraid of when a mouse was lying in a scorpion's nest? There was a famous saying in the headquarters of the Shadow Assassin Alliance. A real assassin had to be expressionless even if someone took advantage of him while he was still a corpse. However, there was a squeaking sound. A heart-wrenching pain came from his buttocks, and the shadow assassin's face turned green. He could almost imagine that the little mole seemed to be eating his wound. It was a pity. William did not have this kind of interest. He just used his small claws and kept fiddling with the wound on his butt. The mole was an assassin, a top-notch assassin. But he was an assassin who had used the warrior's creed. Normal assassins wore leather armor. So even the leather armor of an epic assassin could not defend against the heavy crossbow arrow. William used his small claws to scratch the flesh around the mole's wound. The scene was very bloody and violent, but the prince was also very impressed by the mole's endurance. He had used his body to collide with the arrow, but the mole's body did not even tremble. He was definitely the trump card of the shadow assassins. So he stretched out his evil claws again. It was a torture that lasted for 2 to 3 minutes. The shadow assassin was about to cry. Odom and his companions left during the fight. He did not dare to believe that his anus was still intact, but he could not bear it anymore. He suddenly turned around and stretched out his hand to grab the little mole. He wanted to crush the mole alive. However, an extremely terrifying scene unfolded before his eyes. His fingers, which could pierce through the shield armor, were pinched by the little mole's 2 small claws. Then, pom 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 pom, the little mole violently slammed the assassin. The shadow assassin was dumbfounded. He was in a daze, but he finally realized that the mole was not normal. His aura suddenly increased. Just when someone noticed the aura, the other experts only saw a black shadow piercing through the assassin's chest. At that moment, his corpse disappeared. The existence that had killed him had also disappeared without a trace. In fact, no one had even seen that figure. But many epic experts who witnessed this scene felt a chill in their hearts. Such a powerful assassin was hiding in the dark. They did not know if he was a friend or foe. It made them feel a little afraid. It was definitely a clash between 2 epic assassins hidden in the dark. However, another top assassin was instantly killed. Making an assassin disappear again was enough to prove how powerful that assassin was. Half an hour passed. The epic rank battlefield changed again. As Adolf and Legolas killed the 2 epic demons, many epic orcs did not continue to fight. Because of this half an hour of fighting, they had lost 2 epic fighters. One of them was killed by the Blue Mountain Dwarves, and the other was killed by the hidden assassin. At this moment, they just glared fiercely at the dwarves before taking out space teleportation scrolls and disappearing on the spot. However, the words that they shouted before they left reverberated in the sky. "You 4 dwarf kingdoms, wait for me. The Orc Empire is not a pushover. If you trick us today, you will regret it for the rest of your life tomorrow." This inexplicable sentence made many dwarves a little confused. Many epic dwarves shrugged and didn't pay attention to the group of beastmen, treating them as if they were just saying it. But the prince's eyes lit up. He could not help but laugh. Why was he here? Of course, it was because of the god's avatar. His avatar was now a core member of the Orc Empire. He had a good relationship with the icebound sword sage, Gyur-T, and could even participate in various high-level meetings. He treated William as one of his own. Gyur-T wanted to send William as an assassin, but he chose to refuse. Gyur-T did not think much of it. He only thought that William was afraid of death and did not want to take risk. He only knew how to eat crystals, but that meeting did not make him leave. He also knew that a few assassins would appear here. He also knew that the assassins of the Dark Shadow Alliance would appear at the same time. The Orc assassins were in the open, while the Dark Shadow assassins were in the dark. It could even be said that the appearance of the Dark Shadow assassins was something that the epic orcs did not know. William did not know when this group of people would attack, but he knew that this group of orc assassins had long hidden in the legendary continent. They had followed the Lonely Mountain team and were waiting for an opportunity to appear. He had created the Darkness Invasion to give Odom a chance to show off. But the orcs, who did not know the truth, would definitely seize this opportunity. In this way, an unexpected conspiracy was formed. That was, the 4 dwarf kingdoms had treated the Orc Empire and the Dark Shadow Alliance as soft persimmons. They had tricked them. The Icebound Sword Sage, Altair, and the Dark Shadow Alliance could not understand the reason for being tricked. But the 4 dwarf kings could not explain it either. They did not dare to say that they had hired assassins. They did not know that the dark creatures would surround their legions. They had only sent reinforcements to rescue the legions. Who knew that Odin was here and had even helped them? Simply put, even His Royal Highness had never imagined such a ridiculous situation, but it had happened just like that. I only wanted to let Odin increase the affinity of the dwarves. Originally, it was only a single increase of happiness, but when the assassins appeared, the happiness was doubled. No, it was tripled. It was even quadrupled. William was overjoyed. He could even imagine it. He could imagine how this group of scheming dwarves would face the wrath of T. Sages? Did they think that they could deceive them? The Dark Shadow Alliance? This assassin organization had been in the legendary continent for thousands of years. They even dared to kill legendaries. Chapter 497. Ever since His Royal Highness used the Beast God transformation necklace, he was like Timo squatting in the grass, and he even had the skill of tribulation. Without the true eye, even a legendary big shot would not be able to detect that he had turned into a gopher. It was even more unimaginable that a gopher could have the strength of an epic rank. The assassin of the Dark Shadow Alliance was killed. The assassin of the orc was killed by a sneak attack. When the news reached the ears of the 4 dwarven kings, their faces suddenly turned green. Outsiders who did not know better would have thought that there were sheep grazing on top of their heads. When the king of the Blue Mountain heard that one of his subordinates had killed the assassin of the orc, he was completely on the verge of tears. He could not help but choke. "It's too hard for me, it's too hard for me." The other 3 kings gave him a comforting look. Although this was a big and round pot, and it was the Blue Mountain dwarves who were responsible for it, they were also in the same boat. If the Frozen Sword Saint was looking for trouble, he would definitely not only look for him. After all, the 4 of them were working together. It was impossible for them to abandon their allies just because of the threat of the saint. This was not in line with their interests, and they could not let them be defeated one by one just because of some pressure. The 4 dwarven kingdoms together might be able to face the pressure of the saint, but if they were to be separated, they would not be able to withstand it. What should we do now? Gert sent me a message again, saying that if I do not make things clear, he will come to me for an in-depth talk, the king of the Blue Mountain said anxiously. The king with the stiff beard glanced at him, signaling him to calm down. There was no point in going into an in-depth talk. Then he looked at the transmission scroll again and said in a deep voice, "The Dark Shadow Alliance sent a message. Their assassin was killed by another assassin, and the mission cannot be completed for the time being. However, they suspect that we leaked the information of the assassin. Now, not only do they want us to add the balance, but they also want us to compensate for their losses." Damn it. What about the Dark Shadow Assassin Alliance? Didn't they say that they wouldn't stop until the enemy was dead? We don't even know where they are. How can we expose the information? Give them AD*MN reward. The Iron Fist King sneered. The Stonefoot King sighed. The Dark Shadow Alliance does not have any saints, but they have at least 3 legendary assassins. If we piss them off, we might not even see tomorrow's sun. Now is not the time to piss them off. As for the remaining payment and compensation, Gert, don't fool him. Give him all the food, magic metal, and gold he wants. Just consider it a loss for us. The other 3 dwarven kings looked at each other and felt very unwilling. In this kind of situation, they had to give away their daughter as well as their wife. It was not a good feeling, but they could see clearly the tactics of the Lonely Mountain squad. This group of people was determined to get Lonely Mountain. He even secretly increased the favorability of the army's warriors. Damn it, they did not expect Odin, a small silver coin, to have so many tricks up his sleeves. The Iron Fist King pondered for a while, and said in a deep voice, "Odin wants to go to Lonely Mountain, right? Let him go. I don't believe that he will dare to open the gate. But if he wants to delay time, we can spread the news that he does not have the bloodline of Lonely Mountain." Good. The Blue Mountain King clenched his small fist. Let's do it. I don't believe that the City of Dawn has the tricks of the Winged Sky City. If he dares to open the gate of Lonely Mountain, we will suddenly attack. Can the City Lord of Dawn teleport millions of soldiers to Lonely Mountain at any time? Let's do it. But our 3 legions each have less than 70,000 soldiers. Should we retreat now? The Stonefoot King suddenly asked. The Iron Fist Dwarven King shook his head and sneered. No. Since the City of Dawn is willing to help, we cannot retreat. After dealing with the dark creatures, let the legions continue to delay the legions of the City of Dawn. Otherwise, the Desert Kingdom will be destroyed, and they will only be one step away from Lonely Mountain. The other 3 kings frowned, but they did not say anything. After all, they believed that even if the legions were rescued by the Dawn army, they would not disobey the king's orders. What did a mere favor count for? The king's orders were more important than the heavens and the earth. But when they thought about the compensation they had to give to the Orc Empire and the Dark Shadow Alliance, they felt that they had suffered a huge loss. Should they add some copper to the gold coins? They were very confident in this method ever since the Orc assassins retreated. The epic devils of the Dark Creature army were killed, and the Dark Creature army started to disperse. Without the suppression of the high-level devils, even if the Dark Creatures were not very intelligent, they understood that the surface creatures were not that easy to kill. Naturally, they fled. Since they had come to the gods' world, they had to explore it. There was a saying that went like this: the world was so big that they wanted to explore it. The dark creatures were humans with ideals. They did not want to die on the spot without even eating a single creature. Therefore, this battle on the plains lasted for more than 10 hours. As hundreds of thousands of dark creatures dispersed in all directions, it finally came to an end. When Odin saw that the crisis had been resolved, he did not say much. He only bade farewell to the other dwarves and led the Lonely Mountain team westward. At this very moment, the players and the dwarf army were mixed together. The players did not attack the dwarf army. After all, with the sound of the horn, many dwarf warriors were excited to see the players rescue them. Both sides had a little tacit understanding. Many dwarves who were rescued on the spot even took out their weapons and gave them to the players. This made the players' impression of the dwarf brothers soar. To the players, as long as they could benefit from it, they would be brothers. The relationship between both sides was enhanced in a short period of time. It was as if they had been on the battlefield and visited brothels. However, at this moment, the epic dwarves who had not returned suddenly received news that they were to repel the Dawn army and ensure that the borders of the Desert Kingdom were not to be violated. This was because the rescue mission of the Dawn army had pushed them 6 or 7 kilometers into the Desert Kingdom. As the strongest epic dwarf and the confidant of the king of the Blue Mountain Dwarves, Quirk could not believe that this order was given by the king. But he could not refuse the king's order. After hesitating for a while, he shouted gloomily, "The king has given the order. Draw your weapons and repel the Dawn army." What? The dwarf army was in chaos. You want us to attack our allies? A dwarf threw his weapon on the ground. He was furious. How many people have died to save us? Now you want us to attack our allies? The dwarf warriors in the legion could not help but shout. The legion commander was in disbelief. He could not believe that this was an order from the king. The players were also in chaos. But they were not afraid of death. In addition, the legion commander of the Dawn army was their leader. The half-elf legion commander glanced at the magic transmission scroll and said in a deep voice, "The city lord has given the order. Leave 30,000 people to set up camp here. The rest will go and eliminate the dark creatures. The City of Dawn is the messenger of justice and light. During the darkness invasion, we will not attack our allies. If they want to kill us, let them draw their swords first. Then let's set up camp. Damn, I didn't expect these dwarves to attack us." Some players laughed coldly. There were even some dwarves beside them. At this moment, most of the players looked at them with disdain. They did not expect them to be such people. I wonder who saved them just now. How many of us are left? At least 70,000 to 80,000 of us have gone offline to browse the forum. Tisk tsk, a group of ungrateful dwarves. I've learned something new. The group of players used their taunt skills, and some of the dwarves standing nearby turned red with anger. The players were on the verge of tears. It was obvious. The dwarf army did not react to the command of the epic expert, Chili. They did not draw their swords to attack the players. They even wanted to turn around and attack. When Chili saw this scene, he did not say anything else. When a general was outside, he did not obey the king's orders. It was difficult for him to understand the king's order. Even if Odin wanted to return to the Lonely Mountain, even if he was a member of the City of Dawn, and even if there were conflicts between them, Odin had just saved him. Not only did he not repay the kindness, but he also wanted to draw his swords against him. This was definitely not something that a dwarf would do. Hence, both sides set up camp facing each other. The distance between the two camps was less than 100 meters. The scouts and the guards of the camp could chat together. When the players saw that the dwarf army did not attack, they laughed and went over to join in the fun. It seemed like they wanted to have a friendly chat with the players. The guards of the dwarf camp wanted to stop the players from entering, but they were too embarrassed to say anything. Hence, they allowed the players to walk through the streets and do all sorts of friendly chat. Let's put it this way. As long as they were not enemies, the players dared to barge in and do some friendly chats. Because they were dwarves. And equipment. Moreover, there were many smithing sounds in the dwarf camp. Many players who had damaged equipment ran over to ask the dwarves to help them repair their equipment. Some of the sharp-tongued players wanted to see if there was a chance for a dwarf to forge a piece of equipment for them. If they succeeded, it would be worth it. Apart from this battlefield, the 7 continents of the gods were also attacked by the darkness invasion. The scale of the invasion was dozens of times larger than the first darkness invasion. The forum was bustling with activity, and the players were having a great time killing. But as time passed, the players soon discovered a problem. If the darkness invasion was so fierce, the Grand Duchy would not be able to withstand it. Even with the help of the players, they would not be a match for the darkness invasion. Many foreigners were bewildered. What was going on? They had just boosted the affinity of a Grand Duchy, and now the Grand Duchy was going to fall? Gosh! Their hearts were in pain. They had suffered a loss. The version was forcing them to change factions. But why were the Chinese players in the legendary continent so rich? They were scattered in the 15 Grand Duchies. Logically speaking, they would not be able to withstand the darkness invasion. But why did the large NPC mercenary teams join in the fun? It seemed like they had stolen the missions of the Chinese players, but with the help of the NPC mercenary teams, the Grand Duchies would be able to defend themselves. This meant that the overall strength of the legendary continent would not be affected too much. But why did the mercenary teams of the continent not participate in this? Damn. It was unreasonable. He was not convinced. Report. William scanned the forum and did not know what to say. Was he going to say that the Arctic troops and the Eastern Mercenary Alliance were helping the Grand Duchies because they wanted to steal his business? It could not be helped. The mercenary teams of the City of Dawn were scattered all over the 4 regions. Those who did not want their trump cards to be invaded by other mercenary teams would be competitive. When other small mercenary teams saw that the City of Dawn, the Arctic troops, and the Eastern Mercenary Alliance were participating in the darkness invasion, and that the defense of the Grand Duchies was getting stronger, they also wanted to join in the fun. This was the reason why the Grand Duchy of the legendary continent and the darkness invasion were able to fight evenly. TSK. The butterfly effect was too great. Sorry. Chapter 498. The war between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Sand Sea Kingdom was still ongoing. The darkness invasion could not stop the war between the two kingdoms. Up until now, the major events on the legendary continent had not changed much. The City of Dawn could still develop according to plan. The regular army helped the small tribes and neutral territories to defend against the darkness invasion for free. At the same time, they brought them back to the City of Dawn. The players were hired to help defend the territories of the Grand Duchies and engage in bloody battles. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. William guarded the fortress of the Red Fire Kingdom. He seemed to be idle every day, but no one noticed that his eyes were often in a daze. The scene shifted to a handsome man. His body was glowing with faint light, and his aura was like that of a god. His every move had an extraordinary charm. Was he a god? Actually, it was true. He was a natural-born god. An existence like him was not like a creature of the mortal world. He also had a simple name. That was, Odin, I've brought you out. Why are you still in a daze? Can't you have some fun? Taylor's voice suddenly sounded. Odin calmly glanced at him. He was too lazy to speak. His current persona was that of a tsundere, cold, and extremely arrogant god. He had to make good use of it. Taylor, who was a legendary professional and had the pale orc bloodline, did not feel anything. He was used to Odin's habit of ignoring him. Even though he knew that he was stronger than Odin, he knew that Odin would become stronger sooner or later. Odin might even become a legendary existence. He also knew that Odin did not like to talk, but he really cared about him. Every time Odin obtained a sacred vein, he would let Taylor eat some. 2 days ago, when the Dwarf King had given him a sacred vein, Odin had forced 1/3 of it to Taylor. Odin did not speak, but his eyes showed that if Taylor did not accept it, he would not take it either. Taylor was very touched, so he kept the sacred vein. He planned to give the remaining sacred vein to Odin after Odin had finished eating the other sacred veins. Taylor knew that Odin still wanted to eat. When he was not full, he would go out to hunt for food. He had caused a lot of trouble in the past 3 months. If it was someone else, they would have been sent flying by Gert's slap. Ever since the Orc Empire retreated from the legendary continent, they had found a decent-sized island in the endless ocean and settled 8 million of their people there. However, they were not on that island at the moment. Instead, he came to the Middle-earth in the west. This continent was almost the same size as the legendary continent. The most powerful forces were the 2 human empires, the Holy Empire and the Rose Empire. 4 elven kingdoms, 5 dwarf kingdoms, 2 harpy kingdoms. However, what was more important was that there was an orc empire, 2 orc kingdoms, and orc tribes all over the continent. At the end of the Second Era, the Beastmen suffered a great blow. However, aside from the Fantasy Continent and the Impassable Continent, even if the orcs of the other continents were severely suppressed, there were still 3 orc empires on the legendary continent, the Midland Continent and the Faith Continent. Now that the Orc Empire had been driven away from the legendary continent, the icebound sword sage Gert had found an island to establish his foothold on. He also intended to develop in the Middle-earth continent. It had to be said. In the face of the pressure from the various races on the continent, the Saint-level orcs still sympathized with one another. They were all doing this for the sake of the orc race. The Saint-level orcs of the Middle-earth continent expressed their support for Gert's arrival, but they were unable to provide him with much foothold. Simply put, if you want to fight, go ahead. I don't dare to. At most, I can cheer for you. Ever since I heard that you were defeated, I've become very timid. If not for the fact that my trump card is close to the Dwarf Kingdom and the Human Kingdom, I might have suffered the same fate. Therefore, Gert only intended to investigate the Central Earth to see if there was a place suitable for him to develop. If there wasn't, he would go to other continents. After all, as an ambitious saint-level orc, even if he knew that the gods' continents would be united sooner or later, he was unwilling to let his people live on a small island. Fortunately, although he had lost tens of millions of his people, the Dark World would give him sufficient compensation in the future. At least, he would not fall into a desperate situation. Ever since he came to the Middle-earth continent, Gert had disappeared almost all day. He had left again yesterday, and no one knew when he would return. Odin and Taylor were in the Orc Kingdom's capital, standing quietly on the city walls. Taylor did not know what Odin was thinking. He was only responsible for accompanying him and acting as an excellent bodyguard. They were commonly known as the Path Protector. After a long time, Odin suddenly said, "I want to develop believers in the Middle-earth continent." Taylor's eyes widened. "Brother, are you just saying that, or are you really going to do it?" Odin pondered for a while, looked around and said, "There are still too few orcs. In addition, I don't look like an orc, and the orc faith is not pure enough. This will not be easy for me to become a god in the future." Taylor revealed a look of sudden realization. He asked nervously, "You want to become a god, but you still need faith?" Odin raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still nodded and said, "I mainly rely on devouring magic power or veins, but faith is also the key reason why I can condense godhood." Godhood? Taylor seemed to have heard these two words from a long time ago. Saints did not need to condense godhood at all. As a top legendary professional, he still understood. However, he was still a little far from becoming a saint, and it seemed that he would not have such an opportunity in this lifetime. Odin found that he did not quite understand, so he explained, "Godhood is the core of a god's power. All the magic power I devour will be condensed here. You can think of godhood as my position. The stronger the godhood, the stronger I will be. And faith is the catalyst for godhood. It is not the key factor in godhood. In fact, I can also become a god without faith, and I can even become stronger. It can also cause the problem of not being able to continue advancing because of the lack of faith. But without faith, my cultivation speed will be very slow, and I will need to devour a lot of holy veins." "Sure." A voice suddenly sounded. No one knew when Gert had appeared beside the two of them. This old fox had hidden a long time ago, and when he had nothing to do, he would eavesdrop on the conversation between Odin and Taylor. He had some information in his mind, but his face was expressionless as he said, "I support you in developing believers here, but as a natural god, it seems a little dangerous for you to appear so openly in the central continent." Odin glanced at the faint brilliance on his body and said softly, "As long as I become a legend, the divine light on my body will be completely hidden. I can completely pretend to be a professional practicing Shinto. Even if a saint pays attention to me, they won't care too much. Even if they are really a threat to me, can't I run away?" "Oh, so that's how it is. No wonder the light on your body is getting less and less." Gert nodded thoughtfully. This guy had devoured 7.5 holy veins so far, and the holy light on his body was getting less and less. Those were the holy veins that he had snatched after suffering countless beatings and curses. Every time Gert gave the holy veins to Odin, he looked reluctant, but the effect was obviously very good. Just after the 7th holy vein was devoured, his strength became stronger again, and the others could finally see this guy's face. It was that day. He gave himself a name. Odin. This name. It was carefully chosen by William. Because in the gods' continent, there was no god named Odin. For example, the thunder god Thor. He was also born from heaven and earth, and he was not the son of Odin. But no matter what. Anyway, he wanted to be Odin. Especially in front of the players who had heard of the Norse mythology, he was determined to be the father of Thor. Gert and the others did not know why he gave himself this name. But they felt that this name was not ordinary and seemed to be a little interesting. More importantly, on the day when Odin shouted his name for the first time, a crack suddenly appeared in the originally dark sky, and only a ray of golden light shone on his body. In this magical fantasy world, as a saint, Gert did not realize that Odin had done something. So he had to admit that Odin was something. In the future, he might really become the pillar of the orcs. In particular, gods were not humans. They could accept all kinds of belief. In addition, Odin had been in contact with the orcs since the beginning. Gert had basically let down his guard against Odin. But when Gert heard that Odin could escape from the pursuit of a saint at the legendary level, he did not know what to think. But in the end, he made up his mind and said in a deep voice, "Give me a few days and I'll settle the 2.5 sacred veins for you." "Okay." Odin nodded indifferently. Gert felt a little hurt when he saw Odin's ungrateful face. He felt that he had thrown away a lot of benefits for nothing. But he believed that Odin could not leave him. He also believed that even if Odin was a god, he still had feelings. During this period of time, he had been instilling in Odin the idea of treating the orcs well and treating the orcs as family and friends. Although the guy in front of him did not seem to have changed, and he had no prejudice against any race, he believed that with his persistence, he would definitely be able to befriend Odin in the future. Especially when he discovered a problem. The orcs in the Middle Continent did not seem to be living a better life than the legendary continent. In addition, with the appearance of the Darkness invasion, the Central Continent did not seem to have any reaction, but the powerhouses were all on standby. They seemed to be worried that the Darkness forces might launch a large-scale invasion. So, he did not want to wander around here. He would be easily seen as a thorn in the flesh. If that happened, he would be killed directly. That would be terrible. But another advantage was that there were still many religions and shrines in the Middle Continent. It seemed to be beneficial for Odin's development and strength, especially when he felt that he could not feed this glutton to his heart's content. This little guy always stared at him with a gaze that said, "I want more, I want more." He was almost making a saint feel weak. So, he decided to feed Odin in one go so that he could quickly become a legendary professional. Then, he would immediately let him go. He had no choice. He could not afford to offend him. Chapter 499. What was going on? His avatar was about to reach the legendary level? William was very unhappy. But he had no choice. Ghoul Te shamelessly wanted to push Odin's avatar to the legendary level, and then let him live. This gave him the motivation to become stronger. He wanted to make a fortune on the battlefield and then reap the rewards. He wanted to level up a few more times. But the war between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom was not that easy to resolve. Up until now, the war had lasted for 2 months, and the total number of soldiers who had died on the battlefield had exceeded 180,000. But both kingdoms had legendary professionals. If they were not dead, it meant that the pillars of the kingdom were still there. If a kingdom wanted to force the legendary professionals to make a move, it meant that they did not have enough military strength or had too many epic professionals killed. If the legendary professionals did not make a move, the kingdom would be on the verge of destruction. Therefore, the Red Fire Kingdom decided not to waste time with them. They would focus on attacking the epic experts of the Desert Kingdom and force the legendary experts to make a move. From this point of view, Vikru and his father-in-law were very confident. The previous king of the Desert Kingdom, Azir, who was the pillar of the Desert Kingdom and had the title of King of the Desert, was not only a powerful legendary great enchanter, but he was also an expert who had lived for hundreds of years. But Vikru believed that if he and his father-in-law worked together, they would definitely be able to kill the old sunset glow. Vikru had thought about whether the legendary dwarves would intervene. If the Red Fire Kingdom showed their determination to kill the legendary dwarves would not fight to the death with them. How would the Red Fire Kingdom force them? It was because they had William as a godly shield. No, it was a godly warrior, yes, a godly ranger would be there to hold the fort. Vikru believed that William would be able to use his kiting ability to kill a few epic experts. When Vikru had promised William benefits, William's eyes had lit up. He seemed to be confident. The epic battles between both sides had occurred twice. In the first epic battle, William had killed 3 epic experts. Although he did not kill anyone in the second battle, he used his tankiness to hold back 7 epic experts. Now, the Red Fire Kingdom wanted to give William a chance to kill. In addition, His Royal Highness also wanted to deal with the Red Fire Kingdom as soon as possible so that he could send troops directly to Lonely Mountain in the Desert Sea. Otherwise, he was worried that even if Odin opened the gate to Lonely Mountain, he would be isolated and helpless. He didn't even dare to open the gate of Lonely Mountain because he didn't have any military support. When the two sides added it up, it was like a tortoise and a mung bean. The Red Fire Kingdom decided to send out a massive army to take down the southernmost fortress of the Desert Kingdom first. Meanwhile, the other 6 fortresses would also send troops to feint an attack. Anyway, the Red Fire Kingdom was determined to get the southern fortress. Not only would they send 150,000 troops to attack it, but more than half of their epic professions would also follow the army. If the Desert Kingdom wanted to defend itself, it would have to send out an epic-ranked powerhouse to fight to the death. The movements of the Red Fire Kingdom's army couldn't be detected by a great wizard. Almost as soon as the Crimson Flame army moved out, the Desert Kingdom made effective adjustments. The remaining 6 fortresses also divided a portion of their forces to gather at the southern fortress. Besides delaying the Dwarf Legion, the players of the City of Dawn also cleared out the dark creatures on the plains where there wasn't much greenery. Even though 1 kilogram of sand would fall out of their armor every day, it was still a profit for the players. As long as they stayed on the battlefield, the Red Fire Kingdom had to pay them. Not only did they not have to deal with the powerful Dwarf Legion, but they could also hunt for dark creatures to hunt in the wilderness every day. It was a great life for them. As the strong winds howled, a sandstorm that blotted out the sky appeared in the distance. The 150,000 soldiers of the Red Fire Kingdom didn't choose to postpone the battle just because of the sandstorm. They continued to stay at the city. As for the approaching sandstorm, it wasn't a problem for the professionals. The Wind Enchanter gently waved his hand, and the sandstorm that filled the sky would disperse. The defenders of the city also had 100,000 soldiers. Many epic professionals stood at the top of the city wall, ready for battle. There were 18 of them. They saw the Lord of the City of Dawn, who they hadn't seen for a long time. The handsome young man had appeared again. This meant that the Red Fire Kingdom must be up to no good. When the bloody-handed Gugas saw him, he couldn't help but curse. This D***Ned guy is here. Where's Sword Honorable Golden Sand? If the Sword Honorable Golden Sand isn't here, we won't be able to withstand the attack of the Lord of the City of Dawn. The other experts were also helpless. William had the aura that could intimidate others even before the battle started. But as the attacking side's catapults, cannons, and arrow towers advanced, 3 figures appeared in the western sky of the fortress. Sword Honorable Golden Sand. Everyone saluted. No matter what, Sword Honorable Golden Sand's reputation and combat power were worthy of their greetings. Gugas was delighted as well. More importantly, he had brought 2 epic professions with him. Reinforcements. Gugas didn't know where they came from. But based on their auras, Gugas could feel that these 2 people were not weaker than him. Sword Honorable Golden Sand scanned the crowd and pointed at one of them. He introduced, Sacred Envoy of the Western Magic Sanctuary, Kareno. Greetings. Kareno held his magic staff with a calm expression. He wore a fiery red magic robe, and his fiery aura was very dense. He was obviously a fire enchanter. Did he not have a title? But he was the Sacred Envoy of the Western Magic Sanctuary. That was enough. With the title of Sacred Envoy, it meant that he was the most powerful enchanter in the Western Magic Sanctuary. William's killing of Likangrola had infuriated the Magic Sanctuary. They intended to send experts to take revenge on the City of Dawn. Even if they didn't kill William, it would be worthwhile to kill some of the epic experts in the City of Dawn. Sword Honorable Golden Sand was about to introduce another person. The young and handsome guy chuckled and said, "My name is Bardlet. Nice to meet you." Gugas and the others greeted him. He seemed to understand them, but they could see the disdain he had for them in his eyes. Or rather, Bartlett's gaze made them feel as though they were looking at ants. This made Guggaz and the others very unhappy. But they had no choice. Bartlett was an external aid, and it was not the time to be calculative. As long as they could defeat the Red Fire Kingdom and kill William, everything would be fine. At this moment, Bartlett swept his gaze across the attacking army. Just as he was about to retract his gaze, his face suddenly twitched. The others followed his gaze. They discovered that the Lord of the City of Dawn was waving his arms and greeting them like a little hoodlum. They could not resist the urge to come over and have a chat with him. Sword Honorable Golden Sand looked a little uncomfortable. He could not help but ask, "Do you know the Lord of the City of Dawn?" Bartlett nodded, feeling conflicted. "Not really. Didn't you say that you would help defeat the Red Fire Kingdom? Why is the Lord of the City of Dawn here? Don't you know?" Sword Honorable Golden Sand was speechless. The news of the City of Dawn aiding the Red Fire Kingdom had spread throughout the continent. Why didn't Bartlett know? Were Bartlett really a native of the legendary continent? "I really don't know. But it's not a big deal. We're not friends." Bartlett was worried. Who was he? He was the son of the sun god. His bloodline and endowment were awesome. He did not need to fight. He could quickly advance by training in seclusion. But after his trip to the abyss, he felt that he had been humiliated by William with scrolls. He was very angry. So he returned to the western desert and found his father's temple to continue his seclusion. He took out a portion of his inheritance and planned to show off to William. He wanted to show him what it meant to be the Son of God. It was a coincidence. 2 years ago, he had become an epic professional. Not long after he came out of seclusion, he encountered Sword Honorable Golden Sand. On the other hand, Bartlett looked proud and fearless. He really wanted to test his strength after stepping into the epic stage, so he directly attacked Sword Venerable Golden Sand. In the end, both of them fought to a draw without using their trump card. Hence, Bartlett was indignant and continued his seclusion. But Bartlett had such combat power when he had just advanced to the epic level. This shocked Sword Honorable Golden Sand. Hence, Sword Honorable Golden Sand chatted with Bartlett and exchanged contact details. Today, when he received news of the Red Fire Kingdom's attack, he sent a telepathic message to Bartlett, saying that he had found a good opponent. "He's our opponent?" Bartlett asked doubtfully. "Yes. The Lord of the City of Dawn has thick skin and strong flesh. His defense is ridiculously high. His recovery ability is also very strong." Guggaz explained with good intentions. "Got it." Bartlett glanced at him and said, "Leave the Lord of the City of Dawn to me. The others are yours." "He's very strong," someone said. "You're the ones who are too weak." Bartlett interrupted again. An epic professional clenched his fist. He wanted to teach Bartlett a lesson. But Guggaz stopped him and said telepathically, "We don't know his background, but we can see that he doesn't have a good relationship with the Lord of the City of Dawn. Since he's so arrogant, he must be quite capable. Let's wait and see." Bartlett could not be bothered with the people of the Desert Kingdom. He had agreed to help Sword Honorable Golden Sand because the materials in Sword Honorable Golden Sand's hands were very important to him. Because he had his father's magic spear. Divine Light Spear. It was a godly weapon that could shoot the divine fire of the sun. But when his father died in battle, this godly weapon was also severely damaged. Now it had fallen to the legendary level. His most important goal now was to restore this godly weapon to its former glory. As the Red Fire Kingdom blew the horn of war, the cannons boomed continuously. The epic professionals from both sides charged at each other. Sonic booms continued. The hundreds of meters in the sky instantly turned into an epic battlefield. Bartlett charged at William. When he took out the divine light spear, the sky was filled with radiance. It was as if the sun god had descended. On the other hand, Bartlett was like a sun hanging high in the sky. At this moment, only then did the professionals all gasp in shock. But William did not stay idle when he saw that Bartlett had arrived. He immediately deployed 2 valiant warriors from the City of Dawn. The Time Warrior, Old Leather. The Super Meat Shield, Meng Lu. William could feel it. This decisive battle was not going to be easy. Bartlett did not care. He shouted, "William, look at the scrolls." William's expression changed. Then he saw dozens of scrolls smashing into his face. D*Eminent. Chapter 500. It was red and dazzling. Dozens of forbidden technique scrolls exploded one after another, causing shock waves that rippled out in all directions. The space became distorted. The sea of clouds dissipated. The ground seemed to have been slapped by a giant hand, and a crater that was thousands of meters wide was formed. William, who was at the center of the explosion, was hit by a series of attacks. He was dizzy, and his health points dropped by 60%. The experts behind him were not feeling well either. When they regained their senses, they looked at the Kryptonite Devil King. They thought to themselves, "Do you have to be so perverted? We have just met, and we have not even had a warm-up fight." But he threw out dozens of forbidden scrolls as an appetizer. Did he sell scrolls? Bartlett did not care about the gazes of others. He pointed his divine radiance sword at William and said, "Come at me. Don't you have a lot of scrolls?" William pondered for a few seconds. He wanted to find Delosis and get him to take away this rich second-generation heir who had inherited hundreds of millions of assets. Clearly, Bartlett wasn't here for revenge. He probably just wanted to vent his anger. It was simple. William did not want to fight with this idiot from a rich family. If he could defeat Bartlett, he would suffer losses. But he did not dare to kill him. More importantly, he might not be able to defeat Bartlett. Don't ask why. Because he was afraid that Bartlett would activate the blood essence of the sun god in his body. If that happened, Bartlett could beat up sages. He was the sun god and the lord god. His shadow could beat up ordinary sages. Otherwise, why would Bartlett be so pretentious? Why would Delosis, who was the reincarnation of a god, suck up to this idiot who had just been born? Bartlett had a lot of trump cards. Nobody knew how much blood essence of the sun god he had. When Bartlett saw William's pitiful appearance, he thought that the prince was afraid. He immediately charged at William again with the divine radiance sword. William spat at Bartlett and said, "D*Mn, how dare you be so arrogant? Don't you know how your father died?" William said this in his heart. The two attacks collided. Shockwaves rippled in midair. Streaks of thunder blade chi and golden spear radiance blossomed in the air, but no one dared to approach within a radius of several thousand meters. What surprised William was that Bartlett's power had increased again. The endowment of the Son of God was indeed extraordinary. As a warrior, Bartlett's power was on par with William's. The latter was dumbfounded. "Aren't you a King Ranger?" The saber slashed down with the momentum of splitting a mountain, causing him to almost lose his grip on the long sword in his hand. The battle was extremely intense. Even if they did not activate their domains, ordinary people would not be able to get close to them. Only honorable swordsman Golden Sand stood a short distance away from them. He seemed ready to deal a fatal blow to William at any time. When the other epic professionals of the Red Fire Kingdom charged over, the sacred envoy of the Western Region Magic Sanctuary, Kareno, looked at a lazy fellow and narrowed his eyes at Gugas. "Leave this person to me. Be careful." Bloodhand Butcher shrugged his shoulders. This person was not an epic professional from the Red Fire Kingdom, so he had never seen him before. However, he could vaguely feel that this person was definitely not weak. Old Leather, who was floating lazily in the sky, suddenly saw Kareno beckoning him with his finger. Old Leather pointed at his face and said, "Me? That's you. Since you're on the battlefield, don't pretend to be so full of yourself. Aren't you William's lackey? Today, I'll teach you a lesson." Kalino coldly snorted and smashed the staff in his right hand. Bang! Streaks of fiery red magic ripples spread in all directions in midair. The magic book in Kureno's left hand suddenly turned into bubbles. In the next second, countless bubbles formed countless illusory pages that enveloped Kureno like a super magical shield. Many people could not help but frown when they saw this scene. Kureno was really afraid of death. Or rather, he had a lot of defensive measures. Besides the normal magical shield, he had many other protective shields and a magic book that specialized in defense. His defensive capabilities were comparable to a shield-bearer's, and he was the natural enemy of an assassin. Old Leather was unmoved. He still held his longsword and allowed Kureno to use all kinds of magic. Kureno's expression did not change. He liked this kind of arrogant fellow. He knew that he was not a match for the Lord of the City of Dawn, but he did not think that he could not defeat an unknown fellow from the City of Dawn. Who was the strongest in the City of Dawn? The Magma Warrior Burned Cinder, the Storm Ranger Legolas, and the Space Enchanter Old Band. Everyone could see that. As for the other epic professionals, although they were strong, they were not the best. Of course, the Dragonblood Legion's commander, Albert, was not weak either, especially when he was leading the Dragonblood Legion. However, Burned Cinder was the only one among these famous people. He was even fighting with the bloody-handed butcher, Gugas. Today, Kureno was going to kill one of the generals of the City of Dawn to take revenge for the woman he had slept with. Countless magical runes floated around Kureno, spinning like a storm. He suddenly waved his hand forward. Boom! Half of the runes suddenly gathered and transformed into a flaming giant wielding a large sword. The giant slashed forward. It was a self-created forbidden skill. Flame Devil, Giant's Blade. Old Pie looked at the saber as if he was scared out of his wits. He allowed the saber to fall, not even bothering to dodge. In the next second, boom! When the long sword landed on the ground, a rumbling sound reverberated in all directions. A 1,000-meter wide trench appeared, and countless flames soared into the sky, forming a sea of fire on the ground. The Red Fire Legion's original intention to attack had disappeared. The front had become the battlefield of the epic professionals, and they would die if they went forward. They could only use the cannons to continue bombarding the fortress. It was the same for the fortresses. They could only use long-range attacks against each other. But the surprising thing was Old Leather, who had been slashed, did not move at all. He stood in his original spot carelessly. He blinked and suddenly said, "Did you not use any strength?" Danger. A strong sense of danger rose in Kureno's heart. He immediately shouted, "Flaming Domain, Raging Sea of Flames!" Boom! It was like the scene of an atomic bomb exploding. A mushroom cloud soared into the sky. With Kureno as the center, everything within a 1,000-meter radius turned into a white light. Countless waves of flames burned in midair, forming a flaming domain that spanned thousands of meters. But Old Leather, who had been standing in place, took a step forward. An extremely awkward scene appeared in front of Kureno. He felt that Old Leather seemed to be moving forward, but he also wanted to go left and right. Or rather, he could not predict where Old Leather was going. It was as if his shadow was everywhere, and his true body was everywhere. Shocked, Kureno immediately realized that this was a time professional. He kept retreating, and the magic book on the surface of his body was spinning wildly. But in the next second Old Leather suddenly appeared beside him and said softly, "Distance? Is that useful?" Scram! Kureno's fire giant forbidden spell didn't disperse. It was a continuous forbidden spell. He suddenly drilled into the fire giant's body and controlled it to swing its sword again. But what he slashed was still a shadow. This was because Old Leather had already appeared beside him and slashed at the magic shield on the surface of Kureno's body. Crack! It was like a pebble falling into a calm lake. The ripples kept spreading. The pages of the magic book exploded one after another. Kureno was so scared that he almost peed in his pants. His top-quality magic book had a total of 300 pages, but 100 pages had been destroyed in an instant? What kind of time professional was this? Was he really that strong? Old Leather had not expected that he would not be able to break the shield with a single slash. Old Leather elegantly circled around Correno and stabbed him again and again. Correno moved like a madman, using all kinds of forbidden spells and scrolls in a frenzy. Many professionals in the surroundings witnessed the battle between the two. Correno was a fire element enchanter and a sacred envoy of the Western Region Magic Sanctuary. His combat power was not weak, but he had encountered an existence that could restrain him. Or rather, there were too many people who could restrain time professionals. Many people did not expect the City of Dawn to have such a trump card. Space was king and time was respected. If a normal power wanted to kill an expert of the same level, they could only rely on numbers. It was too difficult to fight one-on-one. William and Bartlett's battle was intense. Both of them were like Kryptonians with bodies of steel. They kept colliding in the air, and blood was drawn with every slash. They were like berserkers, bombarding each other in a frenzy. Bartlett summoned the power of the sun. The sky within a radius of tens of thousands of meters darkened. All the light was absorbed into his body, and his combat power increased tremendously. William also activated the power of the Saint Spirit, and all his attributes increased by 35%. Pom, pom, pom. Continuous normal punches. Bartlett shouted angrily. He had already put away his divine light spear. He realized that if he continued to use his spear, it would be damaged even faster. He had no choice but to give up. His Royal Highness stretched out his hand and blindly waved his hand, blocking many punches with crackling sounds. Then, he also responded with a series of ola, 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 olas. After a series of small punches, Bartlett was smashed into the fortress. Dawn assault. William was unforgiving. His body transformed into a ray of light and pierced into the ground. He was determined to F***ck Bartlett. Bang! Dust flew everywhere. William used the strength of his iron head to smash through several buildings in the fortress. Hundreds of unlucky sand warriors did not even have the chance to scream before they were crushed into meat paste by the shockwave. But he did not hit Bartlett. After Bartlett dodged the attack, he kicked Bartlett's spine. Kacha, kacha sounds were heard. William was unmoved. He dragged his feet along the ground and moved a few hundred meters horizontally. Then, he charged at an even faster speed. Their fists collided once again. Bang! Golden light and thunder scattered everywhere. Then, there was a muffled sound. The granary beside him collapsed with a rumble. William glanced at it and took the opportunity to plunder half of the food. Then, he was beaten out of the fortress by Bartlett. But at this moment, the Golden Sand Swordsman suddenly appeared. He formed a hand seal with both hands, and his eyes flashed with golden light. Hundreds of golden swords broke out from the ground beneath William's feet. Golden Sword Cage Seal. The Golden Sand Swordsman shouted angrily. He waved his right hand, and a golden sword mountain descended from the sky. But no one saw a ghost arrow fusing with the sword mountain. It flew straight into the sky. The Golden Sand Swordsman was looking for an opportunity to kill William. Did His Royal Highness not take any precautions? The sword mountain landed on the ground at an extremely fast speed. The pressure from the sword mountain crushed William's battle energy shield and the sacred light shield that surrounded his body. But, bang! The ghost arrow hit its target. William thought that his unparalleled archery had not hit its target. He was planning to use his full power to resist the sword mountain. But since the arrow had hit its target, he decisively transformed into a saint spirit and traversed through space. He resolved the crisis and charged at the Golden Sand Swordsman. The Golden Sand Swordsman's hair stood on end. When he was hit by the ghost arrow, he had this feeling. But when William appeared in front of him, he felt a fatal sense of crisis. He could not avoid it. He saw a fist the size of a casserole covering his eyes. The darkness made him feel as if he had entered hell. Bang! The golden sand swordsman was sent flying in midair. Half of his face was gone, and his facial bones were exposed in the air. His left eye had also been destroyed. William narrowed his eyes. The golden sand swordsman's killing power was unparalleled, but his defense was not good enough. At the very least, compared to him, his defense was really not good enough. When Bartlett saw this scene, he wanted to help, but he suddenly touched his chin. Not only did he not help, but his body suddenly disappeared. No one knew where he had gone. William did not care about him. He charged at the golden sand swordsman again. "Protect me!" The golden sand swordsman's ear-piercing roar reverberated in the sky. Several epic professionals flew over despite their injuries. If the golden sand swordsman died here, the desert kingdom would be doomed. But William's speed was faster. He ignored the golden sword energy and allowed it to pierce into his body. It affected the speed of his battle energy circulation. He charged at the golden sand swordsman and punched him repeatedly. Pom, 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 pom. Pom, pom, pom. The golden sand swordsman's battle energy transformed into small golden swords that protected his body. But he was temporarily powerless. He was a warrior, but he was more like an ADC with high killing power. When he was attacked by an assassin like William, he could only resist. William did not know what the golden sand swordsman was thinking. Otherwise, he would have beaten the golden sand swordsman until he called for his father. He would have made the golden sand swordsman realize that he was not an assassin. But the golden sand swordsman was a cunning swordsman. The golden sand swordsman shouted for help. The golden sand swordsman's health bar continued to drop. He was about to be beaten to death. But the golden sand swordsman, who had fractures all over his body and was like a zombie, had an ultimate move. A golden light sword expanded rapidly from his body. Not only did it bounce William away, but countless small golden battle energy swords appeared from his body and healed his wounds. William widened his eyes. The golden sand swordsman's health points were not full. But the small golden swords that appeared on his body gave him a shield that was twice his health points. What was more important was, the golden sand swordsman's aura suddenly increased. He had the combat power of a legendary professional. Playing the arrow with full health points? Full blood waves? William could not help but curse. But the golden sand swordsman ignored him. He could only use this move 3 times in his life. This was the second time. But he once again felt the power of the legendary realm. It gave him a feeling of arrogance. He felt that he was the god of this battlefield. Hence, he calmly looked at William. Then he gently waved his hand and shouted, "Swords, come!" Tens of thousands of long swords in the southern fortress were unsheathed and flew into the sky. The countless metal shards and particles hidden underground also turned into golden long swords as they broke out of the ground. They covered the sky. The sword energy was like rain. But His Royal Highness also took a step forward, and thousands of lightning bolts came crashing down. Boom! The thunder domain dispersed. Peerless holy thunder. Intermediate elemental body. He was like the thunder god. He transformed into a ray of lightning and pierced through countless long swords flying towards him. Under the admiration of countless people, a fist that contained countless lightning bolts hit the chest of the golden sand swordsman. Bang! The golden sand swordsman's chest was pierced through. The true damage was off the charts. The shields were useless. The golden sand swordsman died on the spot. The professionals of the desert kingdom suddenly fell silent. William coldly laughed. "Do you think you are fit to shout swords?" But, just as the proud William was about to loot the corpse, he suddenly discovered a figure emerging from the sand and taking the golden sand swordsman's corpse away. William opened his eyes wide and shouted angrily, "Bartlett, return me his space ring. If not, I'll dig your father's grave." "Yes, yes, yes. I'll leave." When Bartlett heard this, his heart trembled. He did not even know where his father's grave was. There were obviously more valuable items inside. If someone dug up his father's grave, it would be a huge loss. Hence, he did not dare to take too many items. He only took the materials that he needed and threw the corpse and golden sand swordsman to William. Then, he turned and ran. But then again, he also wanted to dig up his father's grave. Bartlett wanted to say, "Buddy, let's dig together when we're free. I'll give you 10%. Chapter 501. Swordsman Golden Sand was killed on the spot. His corpse passed through the hands of two people. He did not have any dignity left. Bartlett, the powerful helper hired by the Desert Kingdom, had escaped. Coreno from the Magic Sanctuary was also defeated by Old Leather. He used a teleportation scroll to teleport a long distance away. At that moment, the Desert Kingdom had fallen into a predicament. Many epic experts chose to give up on defending the fortress and retreat while fighting. But in the end, not only did the Desert Kingdom lose their southern fortress, but two of their epic-ranked professionals were also killed during the pursuit. The corpses were also taken away by William. Although he was not the killer, he was an outstanding player in his previous life. Normal NPC's hand speed could not be compared to his. It was simple. To be an expert, one had to start from the speed of looting. Hence, from that day onward, the balance of power between the two kingdoms was completely tipped in the Red Fire Kingdom's favor. After half a month, the Desert Kingdom's second stronghold was also conquered. But from that day onwards, the King of the Desert, Azir, a legendary Grand Mage, had personally come to the battlefield. He had thrown out a few desert puppets to completely control the situation on the battlefield. He had finally shocked the epic experts of the Red Fire Kingdom. Even the handsome prince didn't dare to go up and have fun. According to William, my brother's affinity for me is too low. I can't rely on my looks to save him. Sunset Glow's combat power was too strong. Even among the legendary professionals, she was a powerful expert. Epic professionals could not compare to her. Even if he used his peerless skills, he would not be able to defeat her. But the Red Fire Kingdom's Vikru was not to be outdone. He also rushed to the front line. They did not know why his father-in-law did not come. They also did not know when the legendary battle would begin. The players were not concerned about the war between the two kingdoms, especially the players of the legendary continent. They were not worried about the possibility of the City of Dawn's investment failing. After all, the prince did not arrange for all the players to support the Red Fire Kingdom. This meant that the City of Dawn had chosen to help the Red Fire Kingdom and had the determination to win. Hence, the players were paying attention to the second wave of darkness invasion every day. Every day, the forums were filled with discussions about how many cities we had lost, how many dark creatures we had killed today, how many players had died yesterday, and so on. Mars Hercules had originally planned to participate in the war between the kingdoms, but he realized that in the more advanced battlefields, other than a few of the little brothers with pay-to-win credits who had leveled up to the advanced level, the others were temporarily stuck in the intermediate level. He reckoned that they would not be able to get any benefit. He brought the Martian players from his guild to the Carenza Grand Duchy, the hometown of the Blood Moon Witch. At this moment, many old Martians gathered together. They glanced at the dark red sky, and then glanced at the densely packed dark creatures below the city wall. There was a sense of nervousness in them. It was too much. They had seen the video of the first wave of dark creatures that the City of Dawn faced. At that time, the City of Dawn had faced only 800,000 dark creatures. However, the second wave of darkness invasion resulted in each Grand Duchy facing at least 1.5 million dark creatures. Whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, there was a significant improvement. There were many high-level creatures, but there were also many grandmasters. There was even an epic devil to hold the fort. Fortunately, there were epic experts in the Grand Duchies. The high-level combatants would not start a war just because of a disagreement. Mars Hercules swept his gaze across the dark creatures that continued to attack. After consuming a few potions, he took out his weapon and walked up the city wall. Brothers, let's get to work. Let these underworld creatures witness the combat power of the Martians. Aura! Many Martian players roared. The Earth players, who were already on the city wall, were expressionless. They wanted to ask, when did Aura become the Martian players' roar? What did the Martian players do after they were connected to the internet? The Grand Duchies had many soldiers. With the permission of the human empires, some of the Grand Duchies started to possess cannons. However, the territory of the Grand Duchies had become larger, and they had to defend more cities and roads. The 200,000 players in the City of Dawn were not enough to defend a Grand Duchy. Fortunately, the other NPC mercenary groups had taken the initiative to participate in the defense of the Grand Duchies. It could be said that each of the Grand Duchies had an additional 200,000 players and 70,000 NPC mercenary group. In addition, the Grand Duchies already had 250,000 to 350,000 soldiers. They could withstand the waves of attacks from the dark creatures. But the most important thing was, most of the dark creatures did not know how to spell the word tired. Their endurance was limitless, and they did not need to rest. Since the start of the darkness invasion, the dark creatures had not stopped attacking. Under such circumstances, as time passed, the professionals became more and more tired. They did not have to rest for long before they had to return to the battlefield to fight again. The defending side had the advantage of the city wall. However, excessive fatigue would also cause mental problems. In the second month of the darkness invasion, the Grand Duchies in the legendary continent had more or less lost their border fortresses and cities to the dark creatures. Fortunately, the casualties were not too severe. The civilians had been relocated. Everyone had perfected the operation of clearing the wilderness. In the past, it was to prevent food supplies from being robbed. Now, it was to prevent civilians from being killed by the dark creatures. Therefore, even if the dark creatures gained a certain advantage in a short period of time, there would not be too much of a problem. At most, they could retreat to the second line of defense. But with the appearance of the dark creatures, a second crisis appeared. Many dark warlocks suddenly appeared in the cities of the human countries. They summoned dark creatures and devils in the cities and spread all kinds of rumors that the world was about to be destroyed. In any case, the countries were in a mess. The players were so busy that they felt dizzy. Besides the majority of the players fighting on the front lines, many players began to join the Demon Hunter Guild and hunt the fallen humans and devils in the cities. Basically, it could be said that every wave of the darkness invasion was a version that made the players' kidneys weak. At the same time, in the distant Middle-earth, the European countries and Russian players were also in the same predicament. The defense was not strong enough, and various dark warlocks appeared frequently and spread rumors everywhere. The players had no choice but to fight on two fronts. That was because the Grand Duchies in Middle-earth did not have large NPC mercenary legions to participate in the defense. Even if there were mercenaries, they were usually from the Grand Duchies. This was their homeland, and they had no choice but to participate in the defense mission. At the same time, in the southwest corner of Middle-earth, in the Grand Duchy of St. Onis near the west coast, a total of 350,000 players from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands were doing their best to resist the attack of the dark creatures. Originally, the Grand Duchy of St. Onis was quite strong, but the direction of its development was a little off. It had made great achievements in the maritime industry and had a lot of maritime fleets, but there were many problems in the defense of the city. As a result, when the players in the Grand Duchy faced the dark creatures, they were extremely miserable. They wanted to move the cannons and heavy arrows on the warships to the city walls. Unfortunately, the high and mighty nobles were unwilling to do so. According to the deep thinking of the nobles, even if the country fell, they could still become awesome pirates. So, it was impossible to move the resources on the warships to the city walls. Not in this lifetime. Lafayette Guild, the second largest guild in France, was second only to Royalist Rose. Royalist Rose was a guild directly under a professional player club in France. F***ck, this is too much. This bunch of damned nobles. They are so much like France in our history. A player from Lafayette Guild was very angry. He stood on the city wall and took a sip of red wine. He glanced at the dark creatures that were about to charge at them, but he was not in the mood to draw his sword. He continued lazily, "The dark creatures are attacking again. Where are the cannons? We don't have enough cannons. The front line is all used up. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to go into battle." The player named 82 Lafayette yawned. Seeing that the dark creatures had finally reached the top of the city wall, the guild master shouted, "Time to work, time to work. If we don't, we'll be browsing the forums again." Oh! The player from Lafayette Guild drew his sword weakly and began to charge forward. Laziness was the nature of the French. Slow movement was the basic quality of the French. If the dark creatures killed someone in the city, it would take at least half an hour before the patrolling guards arrived to clean up the mess. If the dark creatures did not reach the top of the city wall, they would not move. More interestingly, the military style of the Grand Duchy of St. Honest was similar to that of France. There were only 100,000 regular soldiers. The other 200,000 soldiers were all mercenary soldiers, commonly known as the Foreign Legion. In the short span of 2 months, the second wave of darkness invasion had occupied 4 cities and 6 fortresses in St. Honest. More importantly, the most well-equipped regular soldiers did not want to move. It was the 200,000 mercenary soldiers and players who were defending the city. This was the main reason why they had lost so many cities. At this time, the fortresses and big cities of the Grand Duchy of St. Honest had fallen one after another. Only the King's City near the west coast was left. Even so, the people of St. Honest were still living a leisurely life, even though the dark creatures were still at their doorstep. Yes. This had a lot to do with the fact that every household in St. Honest had a ship. Because they had a ship and there were many warships in St. Honest, it meant that they still had a way out. The Belgian and Dutch players had rushed to the top of the city wall. They watched as the French players drew their swords and fought with the dark creatures on the city wall. They were rather annoyed that the French players did not fight. But it was useless. The number of players in these two countries was relatively small, so the Grand Duchy of St. Honest should have been designed based on France. But this wave of darkness invasion was obviously somewhat different. The players of the 3 countries gradually discovered that the attacks of the dark creatures were getting fiercer and fiercer. In addition, they had used up most of their cannons and heavy arrows. Advanced and Grandmaster dark creatures also appeared one after another. Under such circumstances, the Grand Duchy of St. Honest finally dispatched its regular army to stop the attack of the Dark Army. But the situation on the battlefield was getting worse and worse. The defense of the King's City lasted for a whole 13 days. When the regular army lost 40,000 soldiers, the King of St. Honest gave the order to flee with the regular army. At this moment, the whole country was in chaos. The players panicked. They had thought that the King of St. Honest would flee, but they did not expect him to be so decisive. He was going to change sides again. But just as the St. Honest fleet fled, countless civilians boarded the ships in panic, and even the mercenaries were about to slip away. The dark clouds in the sky were suddenly torn apart. A figure flashing with white lightning descended from the sky. Rumble. Countless electric currents ran through a radius of tens of thousands of meters. Tens of thousands of dark creatures fell to the ground. The players of the 3 countries on the city wall were dumbfounded. The mercenaries who had not left also widened their eyes. Who was he? No. Why did they feel that he was not here to save people? Was he an alien who fell from the sky? This was because this glowing, godlike existence was lying in the crater of the meteorite with his eyes closed. At this moment, countless people began to take photos, trying to record this magical scene. Then, they watched as the man who had descended from the heavens slowly opened his bright eyes, as if he had just woken up. He could not help but yawn. He looked around with a slightly curious gaze. As if because he had discovered the group of dark creatures, he suddenly murmured to himself, "Dark? Where did you come from?" Then, his palm instantly turned into a hand of light, piercing through the army of dark creatures and grabbing the bewildered epic demon. Before the epic demon could struggle, the man who came out of nowhere squeezed gently, and the demon was reduced to flesh and blood. He glanced at the dark creatures who did not dare to move. He sneered and shouted, "Dark, retreat!" His words were the law. An indescribable sound wave spread forward at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was accompanied by the continuous echoes of the 4 words. The army of dark creatures in front of him fell to the ground in batches like wheat. The skeleton soldiers whose bodies were slightly more fragile were directly turned into powder. There were millions of dark creatures in the army. After he said the 4 words, at least 200,000 of them fell. The remaining used all their strength to run away. At this moment, the man who had descended from the sky finally looked at the group of players. He stepped onto the city wall and closed his eyes again under the gaze of countless people. Until a long time later. He then murmured, "A dream of 100,000 years. I didn't expect that after sleeping for so long, my injuries are still too serious." Gulp. The players who heard this all swallowed their saliva because they realized that they seemed to have encountered an incredible existence. As for a liar? Sorry, this was an NPC, a legendary NPC. However, he seemed to be seriously injured and had slept for 10,000 years? How could he be a liar? And when the body of the man in front of them stopped shining with divine light, the players could finally see his face clearly. Holy sh*t, so handsome. This word popped up in the minds of countless players. Next, this extremely handsome man glanced at them indifferently. A strange look flashed in his eyes as he muttered to himself, "Oh, the chosen one. He won't die. Interesting. He has never seen us before, but he can see through our information at a glance?" This thought appeared in many players' minds. They felt that this person was quite amazing. And the leader of Lafayette Guild, 1982 Lafayette, was the closest. He took a deep breath, mustered his courage and asked, "May I know the name of the savior?" Savior, I didn't expect that after 100,000 years, I still don't have any believers?" The man chuckled. It sounded very harsh, but also a little self-deprecating. The players did not dare to be too presumptuous, afraid of being punished. However, he looked into the distance and said indifferently, "You can call me Odin." In an instant, the dark clouds dispersed. Light and thunder roared in the sky. It seemed to be celebrating his return. Countless players went crazy. The Gods Forum exploded. An hour later, his video appeared on the official homepage. It was an indescribably handsome man. He stood with his hands behind his back and seemed to be murmuring to himself. Then he said, as if reminiscing, "You can call me Odin. God's main god." Chapter 502. In a short period of time, the video and screenshots of Odin's appearance had spread all over the Gods' official homepage and forum. What kind of game was Gods? It was a game full of legends about the god. The players weren't strong enough, so they couldn't gather too much information about the deities. But there were so many players in the 7 continents. They had more or less heard about the reincarnation of the god. This information would be useful when it was put on the forum. They already knew about the reincarnation of the god. The only problem was that the players did not know who the reincarnation of the gods were. Or rather, they did not know if the reincarnation of the gods would appear. But according to the players' imagination, the beginning of the 4th era represented a new chapter in the gods' continent. Odin's appearance not only shocked the players, but it also made them tacitly agree that the era of the gods was coming. The Grand Duchy of St. Connors was a camp shared by all three players. Naturally, there were many streamers who broadcasted the dark creature's attack on the capital for a long time. Therefore, from the moment Odin fell from the clouds, many cameras were focused on him. Therefore, the moment he said his name was Odin, all the forums in the Gods game exploded. The players in Middle-earth were the most enthusiastic. New posts appeared almost every second on the forum, all with titles about Odin. There were pictures from various angles that were put together by many players. It was 720 degrees of handsomeness without any blind spots. He was extremely good-looking. He was instantly promoted to the top Prince Charming of the Middle-earth players. Many young ladies might go and play other 18-plus games as they watched. As for whether there were any shut-ins who went offline while watching, no one knew among them. Rose Killer, the leader of Royal Rose, who loved to browse the forums the most, also posted an encyclopedic post. Odin, the king of the gods in Norse mythology, father of Thor and Loki, the god of trickery. Rumor has it that he has many godhoods, but the gods' continent is a game. The godhood attribute is more like a talent attribute. From this video we should be able to see that ever since Odin appeared, his body could emit white lightning. Maybe the Odin in the gods game is a dual god of light and thunder. Of course, we can't throw out the fact that he has other talent attribute. But no matter what, I'm going to suck up to this handsome Odin who is not one-eyed. With the support of my brothers, I will definitely succeed. On the second floor, I'm Wine Barrel. Stop it. You haven't gotten into the top 4 in 3 consecutive pro leagues. It's not your turn to lick Odin. On the third floor, Wine Barrel is my son. Jack, how can you say that? The internet is not an illegal place. Hurry up and apologize to him. Oh, I forgot to tell you, except for me, all of you are scum like my son. The ages of European and American players ranged from young to old, and there were even many cases of father-son soldiers going into battle. But obviously from this thread, it could be seen that the Middle-earth forums weren't exactly peaceful. Haters were everywhere, and there might even be a melee battle outside of the game. However, everyone was filled with shock and worship towards Odin. Coupled with the powerful strength that Odin displayed in the video, as well as his unparalleled good looks, he would automatically attract fans. In particular, the players were very curious. Since Odin had appeared, how many other Norse myths would appear? Like Thor with his hammer? Or that clever little Loki? However, after Odin dealt with the darkness invasion of St. Nas, he left behind his name and soared into the sky, disappearing without a trace. He only left a lot of questions for the players. That was, where did he come from? Where was he going now? He had been asleep for 100,000 years. What kind of era was it 10,000 years ago? Who was able to injure him so severely that he fell to the level of a legend? Moreover, just what kind of disaster had happened 100,000 years ago to cause such a severe injury to an existence that was originally an overgod? In short, these were some of the topics that the players could discuss. However, the players from the 7 continents were not to be trifled with. These questions concerned the nature of the gods' continent. In version 1.0, many players who dug deep for information and worked as librarians in libraries had already started to collect these clues. Therefore, it didn't take long. Someone collected the information threads on the forums of the various continents and analyzed them in detail. One of the threads was made by a German player called Racing God Schumacher. The gods of the gods world? And the future direction of the gods world was copied and pasted to the main page of the official website. The officials were very familiar with the operation. Or rather, the only thing the officials could do was to advertise in the shop on the official website. Other news and activities were copied from the player's post. The content of the post was as follows. First of all, our game is called Gods. According to the information collected by our friends from the various continents, the gods should have appeared in the mythological era, which is an era with no accurate history and no one knows how long it has been. Then came the first, second and third eras. Version 4.0 is called the beginning of the endless war. The news of the reincarnated gods is no longer a secret. In addition, this Odin descended from the sky. It seems that the era of the gods' descent is not far away. From the looks of it, the name of the game is about to be revealed. In that case, let me answer some questions for everyone. Where did the gods come from? It should be the god realm, which is the alternate dimension. Odin fell from the sky while he was still asleep. It could be that the alternate dimension had completely shattered, causing him to fall from it. Where is he going? I'm sorry, I just saw him coming to the main city we were defending. He used 10,000 thunder to wipe out half of the darkness creatures and left without looking back. I have attached a screenshot of Odin's appearance. JPG. I'm so cool. I'm done. What about you guys? Well, actually, through the appeal we have also solved the two problems that everyone is most concerned about. That is, the fall of the gods. It could be the war between the gods and the darkness creatures. It is more likely that the fall of the main god was related to the darkness creatures. Their greatest enemy was the darkness creatures. It is just a possibility. My guess is that they are not willing to accept me. In that case, why don't we think deeper? What changes will the revival of the gods bring to this world? I can only think of one. War. The beginning of the endless war is not the war between darkness and light that we thought at the beginning. It is a war brought about by the reincarnation of the god. So, choose a side. Do we stand with the factions of the major races, or stand behind the returning gods? This post on the Middle-earth forum was instantly copied and translated by all sorts of people. The players were in an uproar. But no matter what, everyone was certain that the age of the gods was about to begin. So in a short period of time, the players were divided into two factions. That is, the gods have feelings. There were two factions where the gods did not have feelings. But no matter what, in a short period of time, Odin had helped the players of the gods' continent resolve the crisis of the darkness invasion twice. He had attracted a large number of fans. According to the European players, regardless of whether Odin had feelings or not, he was the absolute faith of the European players. They were fans of the King of Gods who had been filmed in countless movies and novels. William was also paying attention to the forum. He discovered that every post by the Chinese players of the legendary continent was laced with lemon juice. He did not know why they were jealous. I'm the one who's fleecing across continents. Why are you little lambs so envious? If I keep groping you, you won't even have any meat left. Is my handsome face not enough to satisfy you? The prince complained and focused his attention on Odin again. At this moment, he controlled Odin and flew to the Third Grand Duchy. He wanted to resolve another wave of darkness invasion and collect more fans. It would be convenient for him to establish another faction in another continent. In other words, he wanted to use the players as an influence to help him establish a temple and collect faith. It was a pity. Some people could not stand it. Or rather, the higher-ups of the central continent felt that he was breaking the rules. It would cause a backlash from the dark world. Therefore, after the discussion of the major factions, the two guardians of the Church of Holy Light and the two legendary paladins who possessed the eyes of Holy Light took the initiative to attack. They flew across the sea of clouds like two rays of light. They intended to stop Odin, who was descending from the sky. The Church of Holy Light was a top neutral faction in the central continent. They believed in the Holy Light and not the God. When the Church of Holy Light was first established, the interior of the church was filled with the statues of the gods. It was only 2,000 years ago that the statues were removed. These two protectors were Left Eye Morgan and Right Eye Luther. They were twin brothers. They had joined the Church of Holy Light since they were young. They also had extraordinary telepathy. They believed in the Holy Light and practiced the Holy Light. Furthermore, they were biological brothers and had many combined skills. They could even resist the attacks of ordinary sages for a short period of time. As Left Eye Morgan was flying, he suddenly had an idea. Who is that Odin? From the information we've found, those chosen ones seem to think that he's a god. They even say that he's a main god. Some even call him the king of gods. Many of the chosen ones also say that he has two sons who are also main gods. Looking at how excited the chosen ones are, I feel that what they're saying is true. Damn it, I feel so weak listening to them. Could it be that the chosen ones are more well-informed than us? Bro, I'm not the Pope. How would I know something that even he has doubts about? But according to the few records from the era of gods, if Odin really is a main god and has the title of King of Gods, it's impossible that we don't have any information about him. Unless Odin's era predated the era of the gods, that was. But if that's the case, then we're in trouble. However, the origins of the chosen ones are too mysterious. They might know things that we don't. We just need to be careful. We're not going to fight him right now, we just need to make sure that he doesn't break the rules. Right Eye Luther's thoughts were heavy. Because they knew too little about the era of gods. No one knew what existed before the era of gods either. If Odin really was that kind of existence, even if he was only at the legendary rank, he wouldn't be someone that they could easily fight against. Left Eye Morgan felt uneasy and asked again, "What if we fight? Beat him up? What if we can't beat him?" "Run," Left Eye Morgan nodded solemnly. "Yes, we might be facing the King of Gods. The holy light that we believe in would probably agree with this idea." Luther was speechless. "Whatever you say, it's what you say." Soon. Because the two of them took a shortcut, half an hour later, they sensed the thunderous pressure. The two of them cautiously approached it. In just a few seconds, the two of them bumped into each other. Right Eye Luther looked at the man in front of him. This thick-browed, big-eyed man compared himself and still felt that he was more handsome. "Odin?" he asked in a muffled voice that he thought was gentle. Prince William said expressionlessly, "Holy Church, why aren't you dealing with the dark creatures? Why are you stopping me?" This sentence was like a sword stabbing *SS Luther's and Morgan's mouths twitched. Because the Holy Church's aim and belief was to get rid of the violent and protect the innocent, to protect justice and light, and to fight against the dark forces. Their doctrine was similar to the Temple of Light's doctrine. Now that the darkness invasion was happening, not only did they not stop it, but they also wanted to stop Odin, who was protecting justice. This made it difficult for them to speak. But there was one thing. The Temple of Light on the legendary continent had already started to take action. Or rather, the Pope of Light was too powerful. He didn't care about the threat of the Dark World. He could deter the dark forces that invaded the Seven Continent. But the dark forces that wanted to invade the legendary continent had to follow the rules set by the Pope of Light. "Why aren't you talking? If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." "Wait." Luther, who had a shiny bald head, said in a deep voice, "I don't know where you are from, and I don't know if you are the so-called god who has descended. But as long as you are on the Middle Continent, you have to follow the rules of the Middle Continent. The Church didn't take action because it might cause a large-scale invasion by the Dark World if we massacred the dark creatures. I hope that you can take this into consideration." Odin sighed and thought for 2 seconds. He looked at the two of them with a sorrowful expression and said, "I didn't expect the Dark World to be able to suppress the God's continent in my dream of 100,000 years." Luther and Morgan, who didn't know the truth, were a little terrified. In addition, Odin's body naturally emitted a divine radiance. They recognized him at a glance. God. This was definitely a radiance that only a god could possess. Since the birth of a god, before he stepped into the divine path, he could emit such a divine radiance. In particular, the words 100,000 years were said so casually that the two of them didn't know what to do. However, Odin was very confident. He said meaningfully, "Remember, the gods' continent is called gods not only because the gods control this continent. but also because we, the gods, are also the protectors of this continent. We protect this continent from being invaded by any existences, and we protect all races from harm. The dark world? Are you afraid of some evil creatures hiding in the lower dimensions? Hee hee, what a joke. Subsequently, Odin continued laughing coldly. Also, tell the sages of this era. From the day I opened my eyes, I have never adapted to the rules of other living beings. I will act according to the rules. This is the rules. If the dark creatures dare to invade, what can the Lord of Darkness do? William glanced at the two bewildered fellows. He decided to show off and run. The two fellows didn't dare to stop him. Odin's god aura was too strong, and he was too arrogant. Even the sages didn't give in to him. Were they going to stop him? Holy Light wouldn't allow it. But Left Eye Morgan couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" He had no choice. He had never seen such an arrogant god. The other reincarnations of the gods were very secretive, but this god was too arrogant. He was scared out of his wits. Odin slowly stopped and turned his head. He said softly, "I am Odin, the king of gods. If the sages of this era want to see me, feel free to find me." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into lightning and left. Chapter 503. Running away after acting cool, Thief Jill was very excited. He dared to call himself the king of gods. It meant that he was not afraid of the sages finding trouble with him. Ever since Odin's clone became legendary, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. William did not dare to say that his clone could kill many experts of the same level when he reached legendary. But he could guarantee that even the sages could not catch him. Because this clone once again had the invincibility talent, it could last for another 3 hours. This meant that other than sages, it was difficult for sages to control him effectively. In addition, the hand of the Thunder God could tear barriers and seals. The Warlock sages' control methods were ineffective against him. Since all kinds of seals were ineffective, he had dozens of teleportation scrolls in his pocket. His light and thunder double acceleration was not something that ordinary people could catch up with. He had a way to escape. In addition, the icebound sword sage, Gyurti, had taken good care of him. As long as he had a chance to send a message, Gyurti would definitely come to protect him. So what did Odin have to do now? Just one sentence. He had reached the pinnacle of marrying his goddess. This was not the legendary continent, and there was no Pope of Light to be afraid of. He would be done for. Odin wanted to tell the many sages in the Middle-earth, everyone here is trash. Hence, in the following period of time, Odin caused trouble everywhere in the Middle-earth continent. Of course, you had to follow your heart. You could say whatever you wanted to show off. At most, people would scold you. But if you showed off too much, people might beat you up. In order to avoid the wrath of the sages, he only resolved the crisis in the 5 grand duchies in the southwest. He did not intend to go to other places. Even so, he had already received a lot of faith. Through Odin's vision, William could see the notification of Faith +1 on the attribute panel. At the same time, he provided the names of the NPCs who believed in him, as well as their small requests, prayers, and wishes. It was not only the Faith +1, but also the Faith +2, +3, and even the highest Faith +10. Obviously, there was a degree of purity in the faith. The higher the purity of the faith, the more wishes and thoughts would be expressed on the information panel. However, when he automatically began to absorb faith, a skill called God's Blessing appeared. He could give a portion of his power back to his believers. There were many requirements. There were also many limitations. Otherwise, with his legendary combat power, even if he gave an ordinary believer 1% of his power, he would definitely be stuffed to death. But it's 10 billion, a full 10 billion. I want to advance from legend to God. According to the requirements, I need at least 10 billion faith points. William's heart skipped a beat. If a living being could provide him with 1 point of faith, he would need at least 10 billion living beings to believe in him. 10 billion. This was close to 90% of the number of intelligent life forms in the Central Plains. It was clearly a little unrealistic to achieve this number. That was why he needed a lot of pure faith. He couldn't just rely on numbers, because the saints wouldn't allow themselves to have so many believers. What's more, faith wasn't a one-time thing. It should be something that could be sustained. If that was the case, as long as he had a few 100 million believers, he could become a deity just by wasting time. As for why the gods of the era of the gods had constructed shrines, it seemed that shrines also had the effect of increasing the power of faith. As for the number of intelligent life forms in the 7 continents, on average, each continent was maintained between 11 billion to 13 billion, excluding the small mermen. But then again, if he wanted the small mermen to believe in him, it seemed to be a little difficult. King of the mermen? William raised his eyebrows. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. Excluding the small mermen, then in the entire gods continent, excluding the fantasy continent and the desperate realm continent, there were about 80 to 90 billion people. If he included the intelligent life forms in the sea. William wasn't sure. But according to the vast sea area of the endless sea, there were at least more than 100 billion people. In other words, there were at least 200 billion intelligent life forms in the world of the god. William calculated carefully and was shocked. He seemed to understand something. Although there are many intelligent life forms, there are also many gods in the mythological era. There are so many ordinary gods that I can't even count them. There are hundreds of reincarnated gods, and there are also many gods like the gods. But there are too many gods. There are not enough living beings in the world of the gods, and there is not enough belief. Therefore, many gods who have reached the level of gods start to study the divine path and impart this training method to the major races so that they can experiment and see if they can reach a higher realm. But in the gods' era, even if there are people who can become sages, there are only a handful of them because the divine path had just started. William thought that he had found the truth behind the fall of the gods. He couldn't help but mutter, "No one has reached the peak of the divine path." But because the gods didn't have enough belief or they couldn't break through to a higher level, they started the gods' war? He had always wondered what kind of external enemy could cause the gods to destroy a large number of them. But ever since he had sex with the Pope of Light in his bedroom, he finally understood that it was difficult for experts like the gods to die unless many experts of the same level fought. Unless they encountered an invincible enemy that forced all the gods to fight with their lives. But he had known Moses for many years. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't notice that Moses was worried about a future enemy. Moses only wanted to take revenge on the mage sage of the magic sanctuary and the Lord of Magic, who was still alive. This meant that the fall of the gods was probably due to a civil war. The gods fought for their belief. But William was very curious. Why would the gods, who are immortal, start a civil war? After all, there are so many experts at the level of the god. No one has absolute confidence in defeating all the gods and becoming a true god king. That's because beliefs are poisonous. William narrowed his eyes. This was something he had forgotten. Why would the gods create the divine path and even reincarnate to cultivate the divine path? Because beliefs were poisonous. Or rather, those thoughts, prayers, and wishes were the real poison. William had the attribute panel, so he could clearly see those wishes. He could even block them because these things appeared in the information panel and didn't flow directly into his mind. But what about the other gods and gods? Did they really have the ability to block their beliefs? This was the source of their power. Their power increased with the increase of their belief. But it didn't mean that they could block such feelings. Even if they could block part of it, the gods couldn't block it all the time in order to maintain their power and prestige. The gods were omniscient and omnipotent. Because you believed in him, you increased his battle prowess. Only then would he be able to hear the wishes in your heart. This was the reason why the gods were omniscient and omnipotent. For the prestige of the gods, he had to maintain this ability. He could easily detect what you were thinking in the deepest part of your heart. But what about, even if the gods were extremely strong over countless years, their beliefs would continue to increase. All kinds of thoughts and wishes would fly into the gods' minds day and night. This naturally became a poison. Because according to his guesses and understanding of Moses, Thor, and the others, he discovered that the gods were not without emotions. At most, they were indifferent. So when countless thoughts flowed into their minds, problems would arise sooner or later. After all, how did the evil gods appear? The natural endowments in this world were clearly elemental. There were no endowments such as laziness, greed, or killing. But why did such gods appear and fall into the dark world? Perhaps he had been poisoned by faith and had even formed this kind of special godhood. Because there were always many believers who wanted to nag at the god. It was like writing a novel. If the gods were professionals, they could nag for a month. All of these could cause a deity to develop a negative personality or even multiple personalities over the course of countless years. Otherwise, the deity's mind would gradually become abnormal. This was the reason why William was certain. It was also because he discovered a problem. All the temples on the gods' continent had almost disappeared. Under the control of the major forces, almost all the living beings on the continent did not believe in the god. Those gods that were sealed in the divine realm, would they just let their believers be wiped out like that? The roots that made them stronger had been uprooted. Were the gods so obedient? Were the gods unable to come out, or did the gods not want to come out of the divine realm? It's very likely that they don't want to come out. William felt a chill in his heart and could not help but shiver. Those gods who had not died should be hiding in the divine realm. They were gradually clearing away the negative thoughts over countless years and trying to maintain the purity of their godhood. But this method of clearing obviously took a long time. Otherwise, it could be the gods in the divine realm used a total of 3 eras to completely solve the problem of the belief poison. They wanted to get rid of this problem once and for all. Divine path, sage path. This is the problem of the gods' fall. William's eyes flickered. The existence that initiated the gods' fall war should not be the gods in the divine realm. It should be the main gods like Moses, the thunder god, and the fire god. They were the ones who wanted to become sage path. And they wanted to be reincarnated to cultivate, so that when they reincarnated, no main god would become the god king. The gods who wanted to reincarnate had to initiate the gods' fall war, so that the other gods would die or be restricted in the divine realm. Because the sage path needed time to develop, the sage path's cultivation method had to be broadened step by step until it became a Yangguan Dao. Until the 4th era, the gods reincarnated and cultivated the sage path. The gods who had not died descended to the world and continued to absorb belief. William did not know if his guess was right. It might even be wrong, because in the Thunder God's temple, the resurrected Thunder God did not recognize the sage path and even disliked the reincarnated Moses. In addition, the dark world was very large, and there was the existence of the abyss world. The uniqueness of the impassable continent and the fantasy continent might have a lot of information that he did not know. But no matter what, William felt that he was closer to the truth of the gods' fall. As his thoughts deepened, William suddenly scratched his head. I have the attribute panel. Does it mean that Odin's clone has already embarked on the path of belief without any repercussions? And my real body has embarked on a brand new sage path. TSK, this seems to be working.